all seen it, only had to scream. Golden Crush built underneath the Lincoln King. CJ is seen it like a dream. Brooklyn vibes to the world of beats. Pixel warriors gather round, controllers clicking, that's the sound. Using beams and breaking down. From the pearls to the global town. Welcome to the game lounge. Welcome to the game lounge. Where the players hang, beats down. Golden Cross to CJ in the mix. Dropping heat, hot and hot, joystick fix. Mr. Roll Dash Cash, catch the squad. Now CJ brings the fire. No facade. Word game sharper than a ninja play. Every Sunday we got the arcade. From Twitch to the globe we take we flight. Rolling moves, don't we shine wide. Press start, you're ready to fight. The game lounge crew keeping it live. Gather round, don't hit pause for the game is the cause. Cheat codes, now we play. Gather pause for the game is the cause. Cheat codes, now we play. Now we play.
Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Welcome in everybody. Welcome to the Game Lounge. Today's episode, we have our special guest, Miss Foxy Cat. We have been looking forward to this for a long time. And I'm your host, Golden Crush 200, and welcome to the Game Lounge.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. This is going to be a good one.
It's going to be a good one.
Okay.
That's right.
So again, introducing Miss Foxy Cat, and at the beginning of the show, I'd like everybody to also introduce themselves and say something to the people.
Okay. My name is Foxy Cat. I am from New York, Brooklyn. And I like to game like everybody else. Excited to be here on the Game Lounge. Most of you guys have seen me moderating either Just Kids channel and Detroit Cozy's channel or some other channels. So really happy to be here. Excited to be here at the Game Lounge.
And we're happy to have you here. We're excited as well. So first thing we like to do, tradition. At the bottle.
Have
Yes.
a bottle. Oh, I have to
You
comment.
gotta,
I got these big
you
nails.
gotta figure it out.
Wow, figure it out. You didn't even take the plastic
That's
off?
your job. That's brand new. That's brand new. They know that.
Oh, we're gonna be sitting here for a minute.
Yeah. This happened last time we gave a girl the bottle. It was here for like 5 minutes.
This is crazy.
There you go. She got it. That was quick.
Well, listen, I'm a drinker.
Hold on now. I pour the first shot.
Oh, excuse me.
She don't and all that. You know? Got right to business. So this is what we do. I lay out these shot glasses.
I was looking at them earlier. 'cause
Yes.
I collect shot glasses.
As do we.
Look at that.
So there we go. And your option, pick where you want to go and see where you end up.
Oh, I already know. I want this one.
It's a house favorite. It's a house favorite. It wins every time. I tell you. All right, here we go. Everybody know that this is me right here.
Okay.
Man of Steel. That's what I do. All right. Grab your glass.
Okay. All right. Cheers. Bottoms up.
To you, Miss Foxy Cat. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Perfect.
From now on, you're a big girl.
I'm a big girl.
Pour your own poison.
All right. Perfect.
Do you? Do you?
Sounds good.
So let's get into it. We got a few questions that we always ask here on Game
Okay.
Lodge, and I can't skip them because they're gonna get mad. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, well, you're already late according to Kitty. So.
Wow, we're not doing that. We're doing that. Y'all not gonna lure me in. Not doing that, lawyer. Okay, so I usually like to ask people, you play games, obviously.
I do.
This, that, third, Twitch, holla at her. What's your first system?
The first system that I played on?
And give us the detail. Was it Christmas, your birthday, who bought it for you? Bang.
Well, my mom already had an Atari.
Okay.
So this is my first exposure was Atari. She didn't have nothing special, ping pong.
Okay.
Nothing special.
Taking it back.
But the actual official time we got, I was about 4 or 5. And she got us a Nintendo.
Ooh.
It had just came out. It only had Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt.
What was you playing
With the
on
guns.
There? With the guns, okay.
With the guns. And so that's all we played for until like more games came out for the system.
Right.
And stuff like that. So that was my first entry into it.
Wow.
So,
Are you still a big fan of the Nintendo?
I do like Nintendo games.
Is that your favorite?
It's not my favorite, but I do like Nintendo games. I grew up on a lot of Nintendo games, Mario, Zelda. So
Okay.
we had quite a few systems, Sega Genesis, PlayStation. So really, I've kind of been exposed to everything.
That game has just been in your circle, but
Right.
you started with a Nintendo.
Right. I
Okay.
started with Nintendo, and then I moved really to PC gaming when I went away for high school. And that was how I entertained myself. You know, you're poor kid from Brooklyn
Yeah.
in this ritzy boarding school with all these ritzy people. You know, how did I entertain myself? I couldn't go on these fancy ski trips. So
Nah.
it was PC gaming.
I relate with that so much. We go on a cruise, I'm gonna be playing the Sonic, right?
So it was PC gaming. So
Okay, I feel
that's my
that.
story.
What's your favorite game?
My favorite game of all time?
That's a question that comes after that.
This
Now.
question comes after that. My favorite, I mean, I have a few. I like a few games.
Okay.
can't-
Give me your top 3.
Top 3.
Give me top 3.
Top 3. But it changes all the time. Okay, I'll just think like longevity, things that I've played several times over. Gunstar Heroes.
Wow, that's a pull.
Gunstar Heroes.
Gunstar Hero. Okay.
Yeah, Gunstar Heroes.
I hear that.
Super Mario 3.
Why specifically 3?
It's the best one.
Okay. I'm not
At least until like Super Mario World and the later games came out. Super Mario 3 is the best one. Top 3, last slot.
That's like
Avernum. It's a PC game.
Avernum.
Yep.
Never heard of it.
It's a PC game. It used to be called Exile. It's a PC.
I know Exile.
It's a
I've heard that.
Turn-based, old school 2D PC game.
What's the name of it again?
Avernum is what it's
Avernum.
called now. It used to be called Exile. It's now called Avernum. It's a story about where you've been exiled from up top. They said we whatever crime you committed, you've been exiled below the earth. And people who've been exiled below the earth started to form communities and stuff like that. So you're essentially adventuring through trying to find a way to escape from the underworld. So
And that's one of that's your top 3 of all time.
Three.
You know what I appreciate? I appreciate when people have unique answers. All right, that's
Yeah.
nice. All 3 of those is like. Here goes my favorite question.
Okay.
See where you at with this right here. If you can only play one game for the rest of your life,
For the rest of my life.
but here goes the in between. You can play the past version and new versions. So basically one title. You see what I'm saying? You can play online if it has that, but you can't play any like crossovers. Like say Street Fighter, you can play Street Fighter 1, 2, 3,
One
4,
game
5, 6.
for the rest of my life.
Only that one.
There's a few, but I'm gonna have to go with Mines of Moria.
Mines of
It
Moria.
is a Windows DOS classic game.
First of Vernum,
He's like,
and now Mines of Moria.
yes,
Who are these niggas? Like-
it's a game where you have to go. It's similar to a roguelite. It's got permadeath. It has everything. You don't need fancy graphics. So if my computer goes kaput, you can play. It's a Windows DOS game. So your character is an @ symbol.
That's
You don't need graphics. You don't need nothing. You can play on your
you
phone
don't need
probably.
graphics.
No, you don't need anything.
Is
You
this
can
a
play
game?
Yes.
How do you win?
You gotta find all the treasure at the bottom, beat the bottom boss on the bottom level of the mines.
That's interesting.
It's very old school.
What's the name of it
very
again?
niche. Mines of Moria.
Mines of Moria and Avernum. I just learned some shit.
Very niche. Very niche.
Those answers are like, you know what I'm
I
saying?
play a little bit of everything. When I say I play a little bit of everything,
I
I play a little
appreciate your
bit of
answers.
everything.
But let's lock in.
Okay.
Marvel or DC? Hey,
I'm a big Wonder Woman fan.
that's what I'm talking about.
So I have
Bring
to
it
go
on
with
home.
I gotta go with DC.
Bring it on home.
I have
bring it
Wonder
on.
Woman everything. I have like
Just go ahead and bring it
5
on
different
home.
Wonder Woman pop Funkos. I have Wonder Woman plaques at my house. So gotta go.
We
with
cool now.
DC.
We cool. We cool. We got a little shaky with Mines of Moria. 'Cause
That's
We
because you
got-
never heard of it.
Nobody ever
That's
heard of it.
That's a you thing.
No, that's a everybody but
That's
you.
not an everybody thing. Anybody
Ain't
who's
nobody.
old school PC 1990s gamers, they'll know what that is.
No way.
Windows DOS.
No way.
Windows DOS. You need no graphics.
That's why nobody knows it.
Listen.
Did
There's
you-
people that know. There's people that know.
So when it comes to gaming and
Right.
you stream,
Yeah.
what's the kind of games you like to stream?
Genshin Impact.
Okay.
Lately I've been doing a lot of the Archipelago. Some people have seen me participate in a few Archipelago multi-worlds with few familiars, Koza, Kit, those guys. And then Draco West hosts a huge multi-world with like 80 something people, 200 games interconnected. It's a lot of fun.
You keep naming games I can't like relate to
He's
her
like,
with.
I
I
get
keep
it.
going gaming and it's just like she keep throwing me like,
So,
you know what I mean?
I guess the question is, are you really a gamer? Because you
So
haven't
you
heard-
asking me questions now.
Yeah, I'm asking you.
You asking me
I'm asking
questions
you.
now. You asking me
I'm
questions
asking
now.
you now.
I'm the one asking the question. My gaming history is a little different for you. I'm a Sonic guy.
Okay.
That's where I started my gaming journey. With Sonic and Street Fighter is where I
Mainstream.
started. Don't say
Mainstream.
it like
you don't,
that.
You don't veer off the
Sonic
path
was
that-
not really. He was mainstream. He's like, you understand what I'm saying? Some Sonic games, you got to really be a fan to really be playing it. All right. Okay. So here's a question that I want to ask. As a mom
as a mom
and a gamer,
and a gamer.
how do you make that work?
My kids game with me. They're huge gamers. They're huge Smash, Pokemon,
Smash Pokemon.
Smash Brothers, Pokemon, Cuphead. They like a lot of co-op games that they can play with other people. Marvel Rivals, they're huge.
Okay, so
They're
they're
very serious about their Marvel Rivals.
so they're big boys.
They're big boys. I have,
Okay.
I have old men,
So
practically.
old men.
They're right there. They're graduating in the next 2 years. I'll be done. They'll be off to
Oh wow!
college.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So how long have you been streaming? How long did you dive into the streaming world community?
The community itself, probably since like 2012. But I didn't dip into like thinking about streaming myself until like the pandemic. I think everybody
Okay.
had a lot of time on their
Yeah,
hands
yeah,
in the pandemic. And at that time I was moderating for a streamer where I was really intertwined with their community.
Right.
We were hosting a lot of things, and so a lot of people were like, we really would love to see you stream. We'd love to see, you're such integral to this community. You're already helping out and helping host these events. Like, why don't you just start streaming? So I was like, all right, but I'll dip my toes in it, and
So how long have you been streaming?
off and on since 2020. But I
Okay.
mean, I think a lot of the hindrance, is just life. And I think a lot of people can relate to that if they're in their wherever they are in their streaming journey.
Right.
You know, making sure you have a good schedule, trying to balance it with your other responsibilities,
and try to stick to that
and
schedule
try
too.
to stick to it, and not get burnt out, right? Because
Yeah.
your social tank, you know, you spend all day on Twitch, you're a moderator,
Yep.
you're in people's chats,
Yep.
and then you want to get you know, on camera and stream yourself. It could be very taxing, and your
It
social
takes a
battery
lot of
just
hours
right.
to really be committed
So you know,
to streaming
right,
if you're gonna really like stream.
correct.
So what do you love about it?
What do I like about it? I just like chatting with people. Like it I can easily be in the middle of a quest. I could be in the middle of something and I will pause to just chat with people, just interacting with people, learning about people, getting tips from people. Like I just like and that's the reason why I started like being a moderator on Twitch for people, was that I just like interacting with people.
Right.
So that's why I like.
Would you? I like this question as well. Would you ever consider like being a full-time streamer? Like that's your.
If I had the ability to,
Would
be a
you
full-time-
like? Would you want to do that?
I would do it. If I had the ability to, I would do it.
What do you mean the ability? You mean time or?
I mean, you know, I work.
That's what I'm saying.
So
Time,
it'd
right?
have
Yeah.
to be replacing my.
That's what I'm
full-time-
saying. Right.
the
That
money
that
I'm
would be your
making.
job, basically.
Right. If that could be my full-time job, I would do it.
I think most of would.
I think most people
I
would.
definitely would.
If I could just sit and chit chat with people
That
for
would be
8
amazing.
hours a day,
That would be amazing.
and play some video games in between,
Can't go wrong with that.
you really can't go
You
wrong.
can't go wrong with that. Imagine paying your bills off streaming.
Right.
Like that's what you do.
And you know, and people don't realize that it's more than just that. You have to get sponsors. You have to do events.
Oh yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
have to network.
Oh yeah.
You
gotta entertain people
You have to
daily.
have a village, because if you don't have a village, yeah, you'll get to a certain point. You
Right.
might even be able to pay some of your bills, but going full time, it's
not
bigger than just
bigger
you.
than it's absolutely bigger than just you.
It's bigger than just
And I get that because like we've been doing Game Lounge like 2 years now.
you.
CJ, 2 years. When I first started, it started with just me. Then I got a co-host, and then CJ came along, then Monet came along, and it just kept building and building and building. So I definitely understand needing a team. You get what I'm
Yes.
saying? Because at this point, I wouldn't be able to do it by myself. Absolutely not. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? Shout out to the crew over there. You know
Shout
what I'm
out to
saying?
the crew.
So, you know, I
Just spit it out. I know it's coming.
I like to ask questions. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we usually ask people if they're single, they dating, blah blah. But we
Right.
already know because we know Mr. Kid.
You know, Mr. Kid.
Mr.
That's
Kid.
right.
That's that. And shout out to Mr. Kid. That's my guy. But last time he was here, he was talking,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm gonna pull it up for you so you can see it real quick.
Why, you didn't believe it?
I don't know. But he was talking.
I was there. I
You-
saw it. I was tuned in.
You was tuned in.
I
I just
was
wanna.
tuned in. Yeah, you could remind the people that weren't here.
Yeah, right. That's what
There
I'm
you
doing.
go.
So we're gonna have a callback moment right here. See if you remember this. In chat? Yeah. I just wanna have a little flashback, you know. You in a relationship?
Yeah.
Shout out to Miss Kid.
Yeah. Miss Two.
Mrs. Who?
Two.
Mrs. Two.
Mrs. Two Kids.
Mrs. Two.
If you wanna say that. Yeah, I have 2 girlfriends.
What? You can say that publicly?
Of course. It's not illegal.
What are you talking about right now?
I do.
What do you mean?
I have 2 girlfriends.
Ain't nobody talking because you're saying this live. What are you doing with your life? Okay, so what did I do wrong in life?
I don't know.
You in a
And
relationship?
he answered me too. He said,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Shout out to Miss Kid.
Yeah, Mrs. Two.
Mrs.
I just
Who?
wanted to, you know.
Mrs. Two.
Mrs. Two Kids.
Mrs. Two. Yeah. Mrs. Two Kids.
This is
So, life is good.
life is good.
Yeah. Oh my god. That was a hilarious moment. It went viral too a little bit.
That's good.
It went
I
viral
think
too.
most people.
I was shocked.
That's usually the reaction.
I was shocked.
That happens.
That's why I was like, you just gonna say this? Like the cameras is watching, dog. Like, it's cool.
Most people are usually shocked because you're right. Like I think a lot of people do things kind of undercover.
Right.
DL, like, you know, like they got those Facebook groups now where it's like, is my man dating another person or whatever?
That's a thing.
Yeah, they got like groups where girls like or people, like I can't say just girls, it's probably dudes in there too. They
Right.
try to figure out their partner is like also talking to other people. They like post their pictures and stuff. So
Wow,
like
that's a whole thing.
it's a whole thing.
Off of like Instagram, that's a separate.
It's like usually on Facebook you see that kind of stuff. Listen, I have a very curated drama filled timeline. I get all the tea. So I don't even be in these groups. They just be coming up on my timeline, like because they're like public posts. So but yeah, like I get it. Like most people think of it as this secret,
Right.
but it's not a secret. You know, like you all hang out together.
Right.
Like, you know, everyone knows everyone, you know, we spend time together. So
I definitely respect it.
it's not a secret.
And my perspective on like those type of subject matters, I always say, whatever everybody agree on, that's it.
That's it. That's it.
That's it. It's like
That's really what it is.
whatever everybody good. That's it. We good.
Right. I feel like the problems that people think happen in relationships like ours are the same problems you might have even when you're dealing with one person.
Mhm.
It's not really any different.
In terms of
It's not like if you have communication issues, it's going to be a problem.
right.
If you have trust issues, there's going to be a problem. If you're not honest with your partner or partners, you're going to have problems. All of those things exist, whether you're dealing with one partner, 5 partners, 2 partners.
It's true.
I think the only difference is you're now, instead of accounting for one other person, you have to account for, you may, depending on how your relationship is set up, because not all poly relationships are the same.
Mm-hmm.
You might have to account for additional people.
Right.
It's not as simple as just being like, we're doing this, because what is that we? Is
Right.
is it me and that person? Is it me, that person, and someone else? So
Honesty is basically what it comes down to at the end of the day.
mhm,
You ready for another one?
yes.
Let me see where I'm at.
Oh, you're changing glasses.
Uh-huh.
We're switching it around.
Uno más, por favor. Thank you.
I'm going with a different color because you changed cups. Wow, we didn't even get to cheer. Look at you.
My
You
bad.
talk about me.
I told from the first one she on her own. From the first one you on your own.
Y'all see this? He didn't even want to cheer glasses or
You're a
nothing.
big girl. You got this. You got this. So little rumor has it that you're gonna be a lawyer today.
I am.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
So,
I am.
so you know
I'm gonna let you speak.
you know that this is the Game Lounge Court,
Okay.
and I got a good lawyer.
Okay.
All right, I'm just letting you know. I mean, the interview's about you.
The interview's about me. That's right.
Right. So I'm just letting you know.
Oh, that's fine.
All right. I hope you're ready.
I'm ready. I even got evidence. Don't worry.
All right. Listen, lawyer. So I like to ask questions like, what do you do when you're not streaming or being a mom? Like your personal time. What's your
time?
go-to thing to do? Not gaming.
Not aside from gaming.
Yeah.
I like going to the gym.
That's a
to
plus.
Work out.
That's a plus.
I do work out. I like doing diamond art sometimes.
Diamond art.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's like you have a picture and it's all color coded and you put little diamonds on there, so now it's like a glittery picture.
Okay.
It's like something, something to do. Keep your
Like
fingers
that's
busy.
like girly. Glitterific is what
It's
you're doing.
glitterific.
Yeah.
I like glitter.
That's
Thank
cool.
you.
It's girly.
Sorry,
That's
my
what.
shoes, my shoes.
There you go. Exactly.
I also, but I like to write sometimes.
Right. What?
Poetry,
Oh.
sometimes some exotic literature, depending on my mood at the time.
Okay.
I love reading.
I was just about to ask you that. You say writing. I was about to say, are you a book reader?
I am a book reader.
What type of book? What's your favorite book?
My favorite book is The Jester by James Patterson.
The Jester by James
The
Patterson.
Jester, yes.
Well, I've never read it,
Of course,
but it's
he hasn't heard of anything that I've been talking about this whole time.
the whole time, from the games to the books. I got one more topic.
I'm
See
about
if
to
we
take
gonna
over
link
the
it.
show 'cause, like he don't know the game, so like now it's my game lounge.
I got fired.
Fired.
live on the interview. So, okay, comics and anime.
And manga? We're talking like book wise?
Anime, you can throw that in there.
I mean,
too.
I've read comics, but I'm more of a manga reader than a comic
Oh.
reader.
Are you an anime watcher?
I am an anime watcher.
Avid. Okay, what do we watch?
What do I watch? A little bit of everything. Just like, I mean, right now I'm watching Dr. Stone, and I'm gonna say this wrong because I always say it wrong. Demons of the Shadow Realm. Did I get that right? Right. Okay, I got it right this time. I always mix them up. ReZero. Reincarnation. Time I got reincarnated as a slime. Look at his face. You don't know.
You don't watch Sunshine Wu?
One Piece.
You watch. Zorro?
Zoro's not my favorite.
Wow. We just. Who's
I
your
mean-
guy?
Nico Robin.
She cool. She cool. Naruto?
I've seen it, yes. A long time ago, kid.
Dragon Ball?
I've seen that. That was actually my first anime. So my
Makes
first introduction to anime was my brother, my older brother, was into it, and he started watching Dragon Ball before it was dubbed in English.
Wow.
So he had the VCR
The
videotapes
tapes. Yep.
that were subtitled, which is part of the reason why I mostly 99.9% watch it sub. I do not watch dubbed.
I prefer subbed as well.
I prefer subbed. Is if you watch it dubbed, like do what works for you. I can't.
Some of it I can watch it dub, but subbed is
subbed is
preferred. I prefer sub.
So that's my introduction into anime. Was
I used to have
watching
a
the
friend-
old VCR
Yeah.
Dragon Ball videos.
I had a friend that used to Papa Jump. They know he was the first one I knew that used to have shit like that. Go down to Chinatown to get the tapes.
Yep, right out of Chinatown.
Right out of
Come home and be
Chinatown,
like,
come
come on,
home,
we
I
got,
had
we
the
got a new
tapes.
videotape. Let's
He was
watch
the first
it.
nigga I knew that was talking about Super Saiyan. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this nigga was on the next level shit. I mean, the
Yeah,
only
so
person
this
I
is
know
like
about
before
shit like
Cartoon
that.
Network. Like most people are like, yeah, I used to watch it on Cartoon Network. Like, nah, I watched it on VCR.
You don't watch Demon Slayer?
I do watch Demon Slayer.
What do you think?
I love it.
It's only got one movie left.
One movie left. Did you watch the recent movie?
Yeah.
It was great. It was
I
amazing.
watched it before it even had sub. I watched it raw.
Oh my goodness. He was like, I can't wait.
I watched it raw.
I gotta watch it right
Hey,
now.
I watched it raw. It was, there was no sub,
Hey, yo.
no dub. Yeah. I was watching just pure Asian talk, and I knew what the fuck was going on.
Listen,
That's when I seen that. So comics. So we said
Comics.
DC.
DC. I mean,
I got a
like
question.
said-
I got a
Okay.
question. We gotta lock in. Batman or Superman?
Superman.
Thank you. We're good. We're good. We're good.
Batman is just a technology
We're
with
good.
money. If he ain't have no money, he wouldn't have technology, and he'd suck.
Preach. Talk that
Like,
shit, man.
don't shake your head. It's the truth. It is the truth.
Come on, look at this. Go ahead. Go
Kryptonite.
ahead. Talk your shit. Go ahead.
Baby could kill Superman.
Nah. I'm like,
Put Kryptonite on
if
Superman's
Bruce
chest.
Wayne grew up
And
broke,
put a baby
there'd
on
be
top.
no
He's
Batman.
dead.
There'd be no Batman
Back
if
him up.
Bruce Wayne broke. If Bruce Wayne was broke, there'd be no.
Yeah, I don't want me to
Batman.
start talking. I
Okay.
just roll the mic over there. I don't even. You
Okay,
done? You done?
right.
Because you could.
Silver Spoon Bruce Wayne. Okay. He doesn't even actually work. Like he just tells people what to do because he inherited the company. Like he don't even work.
He inherited.
He has no sense of 9 to 5. That's
No
why he
9
goes
to
out at
5,
night
bro.
and beats up on people.
Beats
That's
up on people.
non-energy.
People
'cause
who
he ain't do
call
shit all
because
day.
they don't got a 9 to 5, and he's a hero. That's crazy. And he's the hero. This nigga beating up niggas with an EBT card. It's crazy. Like, go chase the penguin, bro. Like, you know what I mean? It's crazy.
You can't just let people live in poverty and peace.
Let them live in peace, bro.
Like, yo, that's
Come
how
on.
it is in the hood. He
Come
just
on.
coming and breaking it up like he's a philanthropist savior. Get
Taking a
outta
shot.
here.
I'm taking a shot. Taking a shot. What's the question? How do
Souls
you
game.
feel about Souls game that's coming from Stu?
I'm actually not really
Yes,
big
it's
into Souls
Superman.
games, but I do want to. So if anybody has recommendations on what I should try first,
Don't let them tell you play Elden Ring. Don't do it.
I mean, someone's already said I should do that first. They're like, you might as well just jump right in and do Elden Ring.
Yeah,
but I
you
feel
just
like
go
that,
jumping at the top level. It's crazy. No, don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to yourself.
So we'll take recommendations. Send them my way. We're happy.
Wukong. That's a
Wukong?
great mid-level good introduction. Difficulties up there, but it's fun and it's
I mean, is Ghost of Tsushima considered a Souls like? So I have played that.
is that a Souls like?
I don't think it is.
It's like
I think it's probably closer. But I
yeah,
don't
it's
think
not
it falls
too.
into that
I don't think
category.
it's 100% in there,
Right.
but
I
it's
played that.
close to it though.
It's close to
Yeah, it's like right on the Wukong. It's like right on the Wukong type shit.
So, there you go.
So, how much longer do you see yourself streaming? You think it's just something you're gonna do for fun until you're just tired of it, or because for me, it's part of my social. It's part of my social life at this point.
I think it depends on the trajectory of my life. If my trajectory shifts, then that might change. But
Okay.
right now, it's right now I'm okay with where I'm at. I'm okay with streaming. I'm okay with continuing to try new games and play with people and try and participate in events and collaborations. So as long as that is still keeping me motivated and happy, I'll keep doing it.
Okay.
But if something were to change, which I don't see that happening anytime soon, but knock on wood, you never know.
Never know.
Nothing is ever promised.
That is a fact. So we're getting ready to. We got to shift over into court soon,
Mm-hmm.
and what I want to ask is, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Everybody got a trajectory for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever the case might be. You have a business, life, streaming, all of that. Maybe streaming is included. Where do you see yourself going? In the next, let me say, give you 5 years.
In the next 5 years, I don't think I like to be realistic,
Mhm.
and I don't think that streaming would have me in a place where I'm doing that full time. I think that I would be continue to do streaming part time.
Mhm.
I would probably be expanding on my consultation work. I'm a consultant. Working with more governments because that's kind of my arena, government contracting. So we're doing a little bit more of that. Having that little dual life, getting ready to figure out when's that shift going to happen. So we're doing less of the 9 to 5 and more of the fun, the streaming, that kind of thing. So
Right.
that's where I see myself in 5
Okay.
years.
And you said you do consultation.
Consultation work.
Is that
yeah.
something you want to expand on, or?
Sure. I'm a health strategy consultant. I come in and I tell companies that are looking to innovate their healthcare systems,
Mhm.
like, this is what they're looking for. Here are some options. This is how you want to do it. Specifically, my arena is governments. So, I work with governments. They say, hey, we're trying to remodernize, or we're trying to change, or we want to bring in a new system for our health and human services or whatever. So think like Medicaid, things like that. And
Right.
I say, here's how you want to do it. Here's what you need. Here are the companies that can offer that. I help them write a proposal. I help them interview the companies and select one to help run their whatever system they're trying to build.
Sounds interesting. How long you been doing that?
Over a year and a half now. I was exclusively on a particular contract. I won't say it just because of legality reasons. But I was on one specific contract and did a few implementations with a specific company. But now I've shifted to do more broader work for New York State.
I hope broader means more. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying.
There's definitely more money.
When you say broader work, you gotta get. You know what I mean? You can't just be doing more work and. You
There's
feel
definitely
me?
more money.
I'm happy to hear that.
So
I want to thank you before we wrap up, because we got
other things.
you got to get ready to go represent your client. All right.
Why you have to say it like that?
I didn't say like what.
Don't disrespect my
say it
client.
like what.
Don't
Say it like
don't
what?
disrespect my
Freedom of
client.
speech.
Listen,
Lawyer.
I got my uniform.
Freedom of speech.
I got my uniform
Freedom
ready.
of speech.
I got my court
Freedom. Are you
outfit
stopping
ready.
me from my freedom of speech? Are you taking my
Listen,
rights away from
no,
me
I'm just
without
saying,
my
don't
legal
talk-
representation?
Don't talk to my.
Where's
don't
my
talk
lawyer?
About
Where's my
my
lawyer?
clients like
Where's
that.
my lawyer? Oh, whoa, he said noted. Listen, hey, Esquire. I want to personally thank you for taking your time off for being a mom, a working lady, streamer, to come into the game lounge and chop it up with GK and the crew. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was
And I'm gonna shout out over to the other side here. We're getting ready to switch on over into court. So CJ DJ, let me know when I'm ready.
Yo, the Sunday night we hit the screen. Golden Crush gold under the gaming king. CJ the DJ spinning like a dream. Brooklyn vibes to the world of themes. Pixel warriors gather round. Controllers clicking, that's the sound. Using games to break it down. From the boroughs to the global town. Welcome to the game lounge. Welcome to the game lounge, where the players hang and the beats pound. Golden Crust and CJ in the mix. Dropping heat hotter than a joystick fix. Mr. Roll with Ash Ketchum, the OG squad. Now CJ brings the fire, no facade. Word game sharper than a ninja's blade. Every Sunday we got the arcade made. From Twitch to the globe we taking flight. Brooklyn roots, though we shine worldwide. Press start if you're ready to vibe. The Game Lounge crew keeping it live. Gather round, don't hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes, now we play raw. Gather round, don't hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes, now we play raw. Gather round, don't hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes.
All right, y'all. All right, so it is officially time for Judge Tuhundo to come in and preside over this case, these proceedings of Koza v. Koza and Koza Esquire versus Kitty Tat. unfortunately, I cannot be a part of this case. So sorry, Kitty. I got told.
That's right. Put it out there. Tell the truth.
They,
Don't block his free speech.
they told me that I am not allowed. I have to be a jury and just sit in the corner. So hands folded, and I'm in the corner. But as we were, Judge Tuhundo presiding.
Ladies and gentlemen.
It's not the same person.
No. GK is not here.
Presiding over his own case.
Proceeding the case is the Honorable Judge Tuhundo.
Yes, in the law offices of Koza and Koza Esquire.
Yes.
LLC Incorporated, as I just found.
LLC Incorporated. GK will not be here as the trial goes on.
Yes.
He will be represented by his lawyer, Koza.
Right. Here we
Koza.
go. Yes.
That's right.
So we need to get our guy Koza on the line to figure out how can we hear him and preside properly with him.
So
Koza, dial in so we can get
to
you.
let everybody know, as the case proceeds, it will be judged by the jury of peers.
Yes.
And
Okay.
Judge Tuhundo will award whatever side gets the most votes.
Yes.
I'm just here to keep the peace, keep it fair, and keep it balanced. I'm the man with the gavel.
Yes, indeed.
Y'all will respect my rules one at a time. Understood? Understood?
You ain't gotta tell me.
All right.
I'm not the
Okay.
one, you know.
Lawyer's a little sassy. The
Yes.
lawyer's a little
Yes.
sassy.
Born to
Okay.
argue.
All right. All right. Boom. We'll see how this is gonna go.
All right,
down.
hold on. Let me get the remote over there to turn it up so Koza can hear
Sure,
us.
sure.
And we can hear him as well. Koza, you there? You can hear us?
Yes, sir. How am I coming through?
Coming through it properly, bro.
Coming through
All
nice.
good.
There we
Can
go.
everybody in chat hear Koza?
Can the lawyer hear? Can you hear Koza?
You trying to hold me down?
I'm trying. We need you to verbally.
Yes, I can hear.
All right. Why you got an attitude?
Audio
on me,
good.
Mr. Judge? Why?
All right.
Why you got an
You
attitude?
looking mighty
on me?
suspicious. That's all I'm saying.
It's Judge Tuhundo.
Yes.
All right.
All right,
I got a
cool.
PhD for this.
So we shall kick it over to Koza, you said you wanted to speak first about the case before we move into the proceedings.
Well, I would like the defense, if she has one prepared to,
Nah.
feel free,
the
with
burden-
your
You don't wanna
opening
take it all over the
statement,
court?
and then I'll take my opening
I'm going
statement.
to. I just wanted to
The
make sure
burden
before
of
I-
proof is on the prosecution, so
Right.
the prosecution needs to go first.
Right.
Oh, well, then by all means, we will go first. We are, all right, so distinguished members of the jury and those unfortunate enough to have been subpoenaed into attendance. Today, the defense will attempt to convince you that this case is about a hairstyle, and for once, the defense is correct. Because this is entirely about a hairstyle. Not money, not property, not violence, not even moderator abuse. No, ladies and gentlemen, this case concerns something far more sacred. The fundamental right of a gamer to make their character look cool. The evidence will show that the host of this show approached the defendant with a simple request, a modest request, or a request so reasonable, so innocent, and so deeply rooted in the principles of liberty that its denial should shock the conscience of every member of this jury. The host wanted braids. That's it. Not world domination, not the defendant's dog Gizmo, not a percentage of the defendant's Twitch revenue, braids. Yet the defendant, acting with malice and a shocking disregard for follicular freedom, denied that request. The prosecution intends to prove that this was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding or a technical issue, but it was a deliberate act of premeditated follicular oppression in the highest degree.
Oh,
The defense may argue that GK could have simply selected a different hairstyle, but the argument is both legally and morally bankrupt. Would we tell a man who wants a sports car to ride a bicycle? Would we tell a chef who wanted a steak to eat celery? Or a king who desires a crown to wear a baseball cap? Of course not. Yet the defendant expects this court to believe that some random haircut was an acceptable substitute for braids. The prosecution rejects this absurdity. We will demonstrate that the defendant knowingly deprived the host an opportunity to fully realize his character's vision, aura, swagger, and overall digital excellence We will show that an entire identity was stolen before it ever had the chance to exist. Members of the jury, history is filled with great injustices. The destruction of libraries, the sinking of ships, the cancellation of beloved TV shows. And today we add another tragedy to that list, the denial of braids to my client, Golden G.K. Crust. And while the defense may try to distract with discussions of moderator power and other side issues, make no mistake, those matters are merely supporting evidence. The heart of this case remains the same. One man had a dream, one streamer stood in his way. And at the conclusion of these proceedings, we are confident that you will find the defendant guilty of unlawful suppression of digital hairstyles, premeditated follicular oppression, crimes against the vibes, and every other charge that this court seems fit to impose. And because of the Game Lounge community, no citizen should ever have to suffer under the tyranny of anti-braid discrimination. Thank you.
Well said.
So, defense, do you have a count
I do.
before we jump into the actual proceedings?
Okay.
Okay.
Gentlemen, ladies, babies, I would like to discuss with you all that we are here. The prosecution likes to say that there is follicular oppression, that GK has suffered distress, and what was the word? Was violated in his choices. However, they also tried to say that the streamer Kitty Tat has abused her mod powers. But I'd like to counter that with, was he really distressed, or is he just using that for his own personal gains? Furthermore, his relationship with his lawyer is extremely suspect because by law, a business partner, which I believe Made Mafia, and which is run by Detroit Koza of Koza and Koza Esquire, and the Game Lounge are business partners. So legally, he shouldn't even be representing GK through personal benefit. And I requested that Detroit Koza recuse himself from representing. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there an issue? Is GK somehow?
Order in the court.
I'm just
Don't get sassy with Judge Tuando.
Wait, Judge Tuando can't say anything just yet.
No, she attacked me.
No,
I'm just
She
asking.
attacked me.
She's just delivering
Don't get
her.
sassy with the
This
judge.
is
She's
just-
just delivering
I didn't
the
say
defense,
nothing.
defense
But
part.
I
of
didn't
it.
say nothing.
Is
You don't
this-
get out of bang bang.
Before we cross over, you let her
So
finish.
it
Go on with
sounds
it.
to me like these are patterns of abuse of Kitty Tat and her reasonableness and her willingness to do things for both GK and Koza of Koza and Koza Associates. It sounds like they only want her to do things that personally benefit them and not the things that she needs to do to fulfill her entire duties, both as a streamer and as a moderator. What you will find and what we will discuss here today is a system of conspiracy, a system of targeted abuse of both Kitty Tat's abilities and her job functions, and then an attempt to slander her name when they happen to not agree with something she may have done. I think you'll find that not only this has been an entire linked conspiracy and the kangaroo court that it has become as a result of this. My client is innocent, and you will find that both between the discussions,
Kangaroo. It's my court.
yeah.
Is it a kangaroo court? I'm
it's a
running this.
kangaroo court, and multiple instances of
Don't talk.
you all right? Multiple instances of slander on her name. Thank you.
Alrighty. Alrighty. So, as we move on to the opening, these were opening statements. Let's move on to our actual case. Here we go.
All right.
All
Get
right.
The court. Order in the court.
So, being that Kitty is on trial for said proceedings, Koza has delivered his opening statement. Foxy Cat has delivered her opening statement. Koza, we would like you to start.
I believe, to get things started, we can move directly over to the evidence. I don't think that calling witnesses is logistically probable or, going to strengthen our case at this time. So, I believe I supplied a video to the court as I am not there to, deliver this myself. If you would like to play that now for the people, by all means.
Sure.
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A. Exhibit A. Oh,
From Koza and Koza.
from Koza. Okay.
Esquire.
Yeah, Esquire. Esquire. Is it this one? Yeah.
Yep, please.
Okay, hold on. Let me just kick everybody over
People
to
of Game Lounge Court. This is Exhibit A, provided by GK's lawyer, Detroit Koza. Koza
Okay.
and Koza.
Quiet in the court.
In the Game Lounge justice system, follicular-based offenses are considered especially heinous. In New York City and on Twitch, the dedicated detectives and lawyers who investigate these vicious felonies are members of an elite squad known as the Department of War Protection. These are their soldiers.
Viewer discretion advised, people. This is graphic.
It says, would anyone want to take a read for this? Okay, let's take a read for this. So it says, on May 29th, 2026, Kitty Tat was creating Twitch viewers in Tamagotchi Life, a life sim game produced by Nintendo. She was creating my client GK's avatar, and upon asking what hairstyle he would like, my client responded with an innocent and sincere request. Exhibit A. And that's when the unthinkable happened. Please watch the following footage. See for yourself.
Great. Tell me that ain't your hair though, right here. Right here. Tell me that's not your hair.
Gaslighting in 2020.
You want braids?
Kitty did not like client of his fundamental right to the hairstyle of his choosing under the premise of not being accurate.
Fuck out of here. I ain't playing with you. No. Get back. Nah, we ain't doing that shit. I told you, I'm making chat accurate. Besides here. That is not accurate.
Which would be fair if there was consistency, but a mere 3 weeks later, this happened.
Give me your skin though. My screen is fucked up. You want to be purple? What? Really? You want to be purple?
Like that purple or like this purple?
Kitty agreed to make the digs purple, which after a strenuous and tedious investigation, we found that he is not purple. Now, some may chalk this up to oversight or think that this is a one-off case. Please watch this clip from a recent stream where Kitty Tat refuses another esteemed member of the community of his skin color with a cold-hearted nah.
Last row above. This color? Nah.
This concludes the evidence and the prosecution has in the matter of Game Lounge v. Kitty Tat. We must overcome follicular. What is this word, follicular? What is this? Follicular discrimination, and our hopes are that this sets precedent for future avatars and gamers everywhere. Thank you for your time. We urge you to do the right thing when it comes to deliberate and deliver a verdict. Chat. obviously from our prosecutor here, Koza
Goes
and
There you
Koza,
go.
attorneys at law, Esquire.
Esquire. Yes. That was GK's lawyer.
Right.
That's your case.
Yes, it is. So let's get back to the case. So since Foxy, you are defending on this case,
Sure.
do you have a rebuttal?
I do have a rebuttal.
Interesting.
First, on the account of Sir Kit being denied his skin color, her screen, which she did provide proof, her screen showed a different color, and so she was questioning whether he really wanted the color that he was asking for, because on her screen it looked red, and she clarified that both in a text to myself and Sir Kit, who is here with us today and can confirm he received such documentation.
Mhm.
So that's number one. Number two, she had already been charged and slandered about causing some follicular depression. And so she went ahead and granted it for fear of having been told that she is denying someone else of what they wanted. And then lastly, you're saying that you denied and it caused distress, because I believe that's what was said last week when the charges were read. Except according to Based Bartholomew Windu, you asked to move in with Kitty and Base Windu, and you did not work, and you drank up all the water in their house. Does that sound like someone who's distressed that he would actually ask to live in Tamagotchi life with a married couple? And I have evidence of that too.
Bartholomew.
Based Bartholomew Windu gave testimony in detail about GK
So based-
living and asking to live with him and his wife. And not only did he ask to live, he caused so much problems that Kitty was dragged into court under the belief that GK was creeping with her and put into question the legitimacy of her baby.
This is some gossip. GK was quick.
Yes, and I have proof. CJ, I sent you in Discord a link to all of the evidence that I've provided for
Oh,
today.
have you?
Oh, so you got exhibits too.
I got
Oh.
exhibits too.
I ain't mad, 'cause
Oh.
I'm just the judge.
Okay, so it would be inside of.
Discord. I sent it to you the link because I have a folder. of
Judge
evidence.
200. This is getting interesting, people.
Judge 200. Okay.
Judge
Does
200.
that sound like someone who's distressed?
So this is your DMs here, right?
Yeah, it should be from Fox. You might have to go on the left side.
On the left side. Okay.
Because I did send it. Yeah, Foxy Cat. I think I
Right
sent it to
there.
you.
Cool.
Oh, you're on GK's. Let me send it to GK.
Yeah.
Would you send it?
I sent it to Secret.
Oh, you sent it to me. I sent that this way.
That's okay. I will get it to you right now.
The link to evidence.
Listen.
I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna write
Listen,
that
I
down.
wasn't about
Esquire
to send
was
all
ready.
my evidence to the opposing group.
Ooh,
Yeah.
make it sound.
You and your
sir,
business
order in the
part-
court back there,
You
all
and
right?
your
Order in the chat. They said you look like Soldier Boy. All right. Who they talking about?
Soldier, the first rapper to be on the game lounge.
First rapper right here.
Right here.
Appreciate all y'all for popping out today.
Yes,
All right, I
indeed.
sent it.
This is
Okay,
the
so
biggest
Foxy
court
has
case.
just sent over.
You guys realize
It's in
this is,
Discord,
case of the century
the
right
link
here.
to,
Yes.
to the
Going down
Google
right here.
Drive
Yes.
that has all my
Watching
evidence.
you.
Can we start
I'm wa-
first
Yes. I'm
with
just gonna
the actual testimony from Based Bartholomew Windu?
based upon.
So, question: did Base Bartholomew Windu
Mhm.
confirm and agree to these name droppings you're doing?
He said it. It's
But
evidence.
did he say it in
He said it on a public forum. Let's
on the stream?
Can we go to Base? Yeah. Can we go to Base Windu testimony, please?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Hold on.
Oh,
Hold
wait a
on.
minute now.
Let's get chatting on
Wait a
everything.
minute now.
Let's get chatting
Wait a
on
minute.
everything now.
What? Base, you snitching? Oh, Judge 200.
Yeah.
Order in the court.
Yeah. Judge 200. Judge 200 got it.
Order in the court,
Judge
people.
200 has to chill out because Golden Crust 200 is not here.
He's not here.
He was
He's not
distraught
here.
about the whole case.
Right.
So he had to take a leave of absence while Koza and
Right.
Koza Esquire present the case for you.
Right. And
But Judge Tuhundo can't make those
no,
kind
we're
of.
fair.
Yeah, we're fair.
We're fair.
We're
But
fair.
they talking some shit in the
We-
back.
right.
Can,
All right, let's see if we can.
Okay, so
bring
this is your
up.
evidence.
this is part of my evidence. I got a whole folder of evidence.
Oh, a whole
Okay.
folder.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
GK 200.
Hey,
is a
yo.
freeloader in my house, not paying bills, and being the mistress to Kitty, getting up in the middle of the night talking about I want water. And look who happens to be there to hear this testimony. Detroit Koza of Koza and Koza Esquire. Water in this economy,
You see it.
GK. Really?
really.
Really? Can we go to
So,
the
so
next?
we're gonna go back. We're gonna go back.
Can we go to the next piece of evidence?
Yes,
that
yes,
we
indeed.
have?
Yes, indeed. We're gonna go right back right now. Hold on. Gotta go back to the.
Yep.
There we
yep.
go. And X this out.
Let's go to the GK wanted to live with Kitty because we did get that live on stream.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's broaden that up a little bit. Run that.
Wait, who was the one that asked to live together?
GK1.
GK wanted.
Ooh.
Wait, who was the one that
We
asked?
got more base window testimony.
We have more
Yo,
base.
Mace is saying a lot out here, fam. What up?
Oh,
What's good? They judge 200. You
more
good?
base testimony exhibit
more
C2.
base testimony. Okay, let's zoom that in.
He's trying to play a guitar naked with a. He's trying to have private time with his wife.
Order in the
And
court,
he
sir.
can't even suck toes because they are always up
Toes is crazy. What's going on?
Hey, yo.
What's going on?
GK. I mean, does this sound like someone who's really distressed and suffering from follicular oppression?
Oh,
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it sounds to me like he was trying to get in close
Right.
with Kitty. He was creeping.
We have more evidence. Exhibit.
No, that's not. That's part of the moderator. Let's make sure. Scroll down. GK be creeping. Exhibit D.
Okay.
So
Okay. Wait a minute. Let's broaden this up.
Again, Base.
Get my
I would like to
glasses ready.
thank Base Bartholomew for giving us this
Base
honest,
Bartholomew
vulnerable
window.
testimony of what was going on
I'ma
in his
pull up.
married Tamagotchi household.
Right.
why do you want GK kicked out and not Bear?
This is why Base
Because
Windu wants
because he's creeping.
Because he creeping.
Because he's
Okay.
creeping. Oh, by the way, GK, if you're watching,
So-
you owe me money for moderating the Maury case that subsequently happened
Oh wow.
as a result of you creeping
Oh,
in
wow.
Based Windu and Kitty Tat's household.
So we will definitely get that message over to Golden Quest
Is there
200.
any
There's
DNA
gonna be-
test?
There's gonna be a bill for that. Oh, and while
Well,
we're
wait
on
a
the
minute
subject of the kangaroo court of Koza and Koza representing his business partner, I just want to point out that Detroit Koza was also part of an attempt to bribe the judge of the proceedings of the Maury case. We have that on as evidence.
We had that
You
as
still
ev-
happen to have everything, right?
we had that as evidence as well. Oh, okay.
We have that as evidence as well.
Oh,
Part
okay.
of the bribe to get the judge to say that Kitty and Windu's baby was GK's baby
Oh.
because
Oh.
of such
Th-
creeping.
This doesn't
But
sound like
a
kangaroo. This
good,
sounds like Maury.
honest judge like myself made sure to deliver the correct ruling, which was that it is Base Windu's baby. So no worries, GK.
So why y'all,
but you
why y'all
owe me
coming
a-
that why GK gotta pay you for Base Windu's baby?
I'm just
What
saying.
kind of collusion
I
going
had to
on here?
moderate the
Why
trial.
GK gotta pay you?
You was
Wait a
living
minute, but
broke
I'm
in
the
his
judge,
house.
though. Wait a minute, what I just heard is GK gotta pay for Base Windu's baby, and you promoting that?
No, I didn't say he had to pay
You
for the
said
baby.
GK gotta pay
I
you.
said he had to pay for the moderation
Off
of the court that had to happen because he was living
But
for
that's-
free
That's not
and
his baby, though.
stressing Base
That's
and
not
Kitty
his baby.
out. It's not
So
the
Base
point.
was paying his own baby bill.
Listen.
I'm gonna tell
you
GK
not
pull
pay-
up on Base.
You not
Order in
paying
the
baby
court.
bills. You
Order-
paying the court bills for
Just
causing
200.
such
Order in the
distress.
court. Let's go.
Let's
go.
Here's a couple of
go.
contexts because he can't be here at this moment. to
Wait,
speak,
where's
so-
Koza and Koza?
But he's here, I think. But on the defense of Base Bartholomew Windu,
Base Bartholomew Windu.
he says objection. Information is being used out of context.
Mhm.
That's AI. He also said, timeout, words is used out of context of discrimination against GK. This has nothing to do with GK hair. I can't help.
Hey, hold on.
Wait a minute. Order in
Go
the
ahead,
court.
Philip. Go ahead.
This
Keep reading.
has-
Order in the court.
I can't help Kitty had an affair. This shows Kitty had a motive to scam the system.
Hold on.
Established that.
Hold on. Order in the court. What
Kitty
I'm
said, I
hearing
did
is-
not have an affair, but they
Well,
said
hold on. Give me a
GK
second,
just
CJ.
admitted to it.
Give me a second, CJ. What I'm hearing is your own evidence is going against you and said it's being taken out of context.
It's not
So
out
we
of
got
context.
your evidence is tampered with now.
It's not out of context. That's
He's
not
saying
out of
it's not
context.
true. He's here in the court.
He said it.
He's here in the court. He's saying it's being taken out of as the judge. The
He's
people
the
got
one
to
that said it.
understand.
I-
Base win. Order in the court. Order in the court. Judge 200. So let me get on, nigga. Don't worry. What I'm hearing is your own evidence is saying that you're using what he said out of context. That's all I'm putting out there. I'm keeping it
It's
fair.
not out of context.
Keep
He
going.
said you
Keep
were
going.
freeloading in this house, and I'm saying that if
But
you're
he said
that
what he said
distressed,
ain't got nothing to do
from
with the
follic-
hairstyle
and
GK
if you're
requested.
that distressed
And
from
GK's not the
follicular
daddy.
depression, why were you asking to live in her house?
You gotta ask
That's
GK
all
that.
I'm saying.
You gotta
That's
ask
all I'm
GK
saying.
that.
Okay. So from the prosecution, does the prosecution rest or does they have a counter a counter statement?
Mr. Kozo, are you present?
I mean, I too was wondering why, none of the evidence presented was in relation to the follicular oppression that
is a point.
we are talking about here today. But if you go back to, the evidence submitted by the defense in D2 specifically, if you pay attention to the chat over there, Kitty is the one who accepted GK into the household without consulting her husband, based Bartholomew
That is
Windu.
the point.
So, I mean, not only am I here for, GK in the capacity of a friend, not necessarily a business partner. There are no written contracts signed between myself and the Game On, but I am reaching out to Based Windu that if he needs any services, so the services of a lawyer for future trials in relation to, I don't know, something called slander, then by all means, Based Bartholomew Windu might be there open, and we can discuss for a further case.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is the case will be judged fully by the peers.
Kitty says
Go
objection.
ahead,
She says
go ahead.
conflict of interest.
Go ahead.
I'm saying conflict of interest.
The
He can't
defense.
represent you and Windu. That's a conflict of interest.
He's not
And
representing
the
Windu.
the evidence was to establish that you weren't as distressed, or GK, excuse me, that GK was not distressed and suffering from follicular depression because he then later asked to live in her house.
those
So
are-
you're focusing on the wrong things. You're talking about taking it out of context. This is entirely out of context because you went, GK went and asked to live in their house, but he's suffering from follicular depression? That doesn't add up. That doesn't add up. Doesn't add up. Why would you live with your oppressor? Does that make sense? It does not.
Stockholm syndrome. That's
No.
the only 2 words I have to say.
Absolutely
Stockholm
not.
syndrome.
Absolutely not. That's a reach. Get out of here.
Under duress.
I do notice though, a lot of what you guys are defending aren't what the actual charges are.
I'm sorry. The charges that were read in court last week was that GK suffered from follicular oppression and was distressed as a result.
And it was caused
And
by
so-
what the
and-
charges are.
and-
It was caused by what the charges
And
are,
I'm
which is what you
saying
need to be
you
defending.
cannot say
You're
that.
defending the causes of the charges.
But she said she wanted to make it accurate. And you don't have, and GK does not have brains.
Stockholm
But
syndrome.
So, I
other
mean-
people were requested. You showed evidence of 2
That
other
was
people.
after her charges were already
requested-
read. That was my client
Okay.
in fear
All
because
right.
she had already been charged
Order
and
in the court,
accused.
sassy. Order in the court is all I'm saying. Because you over
I'm
here,
just saying
you
this was
over here,
after
and you extra.
she was already
You extra is what I'm saying.
That's right.
You
I'm
extra is what I'm
That's
saying.
right, I'm
Not in
extra.
Judge 200
Every
side.
day.
Not in Judge. You
Every
see my
day.
shit?
You
I
see-
graduated for
you
this.
see-
I graduated for
I
this.
was born with
I
this.
passed the bars for this.
I was born
Don't come
with
at
this.
me. Don't come at me,
Don't come at
GED
me.
lawyer.
Don't come at
GED
me.
lawyer.
Listen,
I didn't see you at the graduation. I didn't. Order in the court. Order in the court. Order in the court. You are sassy. You're sassy is what you are. Order in the court. I see you both got that thing.
M popped in the room. Hey, M.
Hey, okay.
M for popping in the room.
At this time, we need to have order in the court. Both sides said what they said.
Yes.
It's on the table. Can we get a poll started?
Yes. We're gonna get a poll started right now. Chat. You are the jury of. Kitty is being sworn. Oh, she's been sworn in, but Kitty is being determined based off of our peers, us here, and you guys there. So we will start the poll. Give me a sec.
Guilty
So slash.
or not guilty? That's what it comes down to. Says.
That's right.
That's right. Okay. Okay.
Born to argue.
Born to
Says it right
argue.
on my shirt.
Yeah.
All right. So, is she innocent or guilty? Is
Did you guys take a poll?
Kitty Tat? Oh wait, I'm gonna make space because we gotta make sure we say the right person.
For legal reasons.
Legal reasons. Innocent. I should have put N-O consent. It made life easier.
This really should just be a mistrial.
Oh,
I'm just saying.
are you reaching for the mistrial?
Innocent or guilty?
If we want to finish with the
That's
poll,
where
I'm
we
just
at.
saying
Guilty.
business partners can't represent each other legally. But,
Order
you
in the
know,
court. Came to the conclusion already.
I'm just
I'm taking
putting
you
it
to
out
court.
there.
Sassy. You wait till I call you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna highlight my nigga because it's crazy. Niggas
Okay.
just snitching and shit.
Well,
you know what I mean?
We're gonna put this.
Shouldn't have been out there trying to.
We're gonna put this on a
Stop
second 2-minute poll.
2-minute poll, people.
2-minute poll. So everybody join in. And the poll is up. Do you believe Kitty Tat is innocent or guilty based off of the evidence that was produced by both prosecution and defense? Let's see. Okay. All right. We're not gonna keep peeking at that.
No.
We're gonna let the jury deliberate inside of their office.
Innocent or guilty? Vote.
In the meantime, the jury that's here, what do we believe Kitty Tat is innocent or guilty? Melanated Monet?
What? What? You see, this
gotta-
is you can't, what you mean? But you can't tell the judge that I said innocent before the case started. That's some crazy shit.
Okay, so you believe innocent. So Just Kid, aka Soldier Boy, first rapper to be on the game. What do you believe Kitty Tat to be? Innocent or guilty?
This is a kangaroo court.
This is the kangaroo
This is
court.
kangaroo
It's
court.
bullshit.
Wow, sir. Wow. You better hope your ass don't end up in jail.
The poll is it's in here. It's in
Separation
the
of-
stream. You gotta
What
look at
is
the
your
top of the
vote,
stream.
sir?
Right.
Innocent or guilty?
you-
Even though we already know what you're gonna
Excuse
pick.
me.
Innocent.
GK
Yeah, look at
told,
this. It's crazy.
GK told his employees.
Zombo, the poll is inside of the chat. Inside of
It's
the
inside. It's up. Yeah.
it's at the
CJ
top
couldn't
of it.
participate. Monet couldn't participate. What? Your business partner could participate? Like, make that make sense. I'm just
Right.
saying.
So Just Kid, do you believe
You're not
Kitty is
Kitty's
innocent or
homegirl.
guilty?
I believe
Homegirl and business partner is the
Innocent.
same
No,
thing.
it's not. You're
Yeah,
defending your
no,
people.
no,
we
no,
have
it
to
is
do
the same thing. By
defending your
law,
people.
by law, you can Google it. You cannot represent your business partner in legal proceedings because it is a personal benefit.
Now,
You need to recuse yourself.
for me, it makes sense of what the evidence that was produced by Koza and Koza Esquire. But based on the evidence that was produced by Foxy Cat and All Lats, All Lats, I would like to say that Kitty is innocent. So the poll has been done. Chat says guilty. So it's 7 votes on guilty, 6 votes on innocent. However, based on the votes that were here, adds 3 to the innocent vote. So that means innocent is actually 9. So Kitty Tat is officially innocent of all charges. All charges may be dropped. Judge 200.
I would like to thank the wonderful jury for your participation. It was much appreciated. Thank you. I'm glad that we got justice here today.
Judge 200. What, do you see the votes based off of what we have said? How do you rule on this case?
The Honorable Judge Tuhundo proceeding over the case. The court of the Game Lounge. The people have decided that Kitty Tat is indeed innocent.
She's innocent. Let's go. All right, so let's
Not salty.
let's hit the Superman for our girl Kitty Cat for being innocent.
It's okay.
Oh my God. Basement, we're talking about party.
Party time, party time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure GK gonna be there.
That
All right,
was
y'all.
amazing.
It's the end of the court. The biggest game lounge court we had. So far.
Wait. I know that court has ended, but I just want to put out there that it was said that Kitty is possibly abusing her bod powers, but I do have some evidence to the
Court,
contrary.
it's over though.
I get that.
We're not gonna go look at
I
evidence now.
just want to
No,
make.
that nobody does that.
Is it?
Boom?
Is it because I
Remember
clipped,
when I said? Psh,
Is it because I clipped GK saying
but-
asking Kitty to do mod work after
but-
he already charged her?
But you remember when I said? Psh?
I also clipped Koza asking Kitty to do the same.
All right, this is illegal. What
okay.
you're doing because the
I was
case is
just
over.
asking. I was just asking.
I mean,
I
we,
said that already.
we,
is what
we,
I'm
we,
saying.
I mean,
I was
that,
just asking.
we can go back to
I was just
court.
But it's over.
No,
Okay.
no.
Why would you want to go back to court?
I
She's
was-
innocent.
I mean,
was
she's
asking.
innocent, but I just wanted to let her,
No, but it's over. She,
Okay,
you
we
I
go
won.
was
back.
asking.
You see what I mean by your sassy? This is
Yeah,
what
I
I
know
mean
I'm
by your
sassy.
sassy.
I know I'm sassy.
You won already. We don't
Crushing
need all
defeat.
already.
Okay.
Stomping
You know what
out
I'm
the
saying?
competition.
So
Nobody care. We don't care.
So according
We
to
don't
some
care.
people in chat, like Zamo and Dirty Dan, they said guilty. She's guilty.
Y'all could feel that way, but the justice has prevailed. So
Guilty.
you're entitled to
No,
your opinion. Opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one.
Whatever. Go ahead, Koza.
The prosecution will secede to the fact that Kitty is guilty. GG's to the defense. I will go ahead and say that you put up a strong fight. Despite the fact that we did catch the allegation in 4K, you did manage to swing the jury of her peers in her favor. Kitty, the only reason that you were on trial today is because when you love someone, you have to hold them accountable. And that accountability needed to be determined by this court. So you prevailed, you're free. There will be no good old fashioned finger pointing with ha-has. There will be no repenting to Father Blood this week. There will be no such buffoonery and or fuckery. So GG's, enjoy your freedom, and let's all try to stay on the straight and narrow because I put a lot of hours into this case and I can't be doing this every week.
I appreciate Koza
Everybody
and
enjoy the
Koza
rest of
Koza,
Esquire.
we definitely appreciate you, my
Good
guy.
job.
Thank
My
you.
God,
Good
yes,
job,
indeed.
Koza.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
All right, court's over, so
And we'll catch you later.
everybody clap it up.
There
That
you
was
go.
fun. Appreciate you.
All right. All right. All right. So,
Appreciate everybody for participating.
Judge
but real
Judge
quick, if you can,
Hundo? Yes.
yeah, Judge Stu Hundo is gonna step aside now, and he's gonna go find GK and let GK know what the judgment was,
Right.
and see if GK will return to the show for the rest of it.
Yes. Yes, indeed. All right.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right, guys. Now GK's back. I heard the verdict. Congratulations to Miss Lawyer here. The judge told me you were sassy though.
I am sassy. I'm very sassy.
That's what he said. He was upset with you.
Listen, he could be upset. We could go again.
Congratulations. That was fun, guys. What you guys think about that?
Yes.
That was awesome.
I had a good
enjoyed myself.
time.
Appreciate that. Thank you for participating.
Thank you for having me.
All
and
right, let's have some
participating.
fun real quick. Our guests don't have too much longer to spend with us, so let's kick on over to a good time.
Which one is that? Which one going to?
They do the drip or drop.
Okay.
Let's do drip or drop real quick. Just to explain real quick, everybody drip or drop. The first half, we're gonna look at some comic anime outfits.
Okay.
Drip means we like it. Drop means we don't. Sometimes I have a few more pop-up verses, 2 different outfits. between like which one's drip, which one's drop. The second half is real outfits for real people. Drip or drop. Fun game. Let's have a good time. All right. You're our guest, so you get first.
Okay.
First say. CJ.
Yep. Here we go.
Drip or drop, y'all. It's been a while. Usually I put celebrity, but this time I don't hear nothing. Drip. Or you thinking, production.
Oh, look at
Okay.
Magneto.
Uncle Magnus.
Drip or drop. I hate it.
Oh,
I fucking hate it.
It's the
The
I don't like
It's the
97?
long, it's the long sleeves
No,
for me.
The
it's
auntie
cold-
sleeve.
It's the gloves
cold-
for me. The gloves
It's the
up here.
cold shoulders. Like I don't like cold shoulder shirts. Like if it was a
Like,
full, like
This
a
is a
full
complete
sleeve.
drop for
like-
me.
Like I just no, this is a drop. Like
And then the
You
gloves.
ain't got no show. Like, you got no.
Then
I
the
don't like
gloves
the
up
cold
here.
shoul-
The
like-
gloves up here.
He's-
though.
nah,
It's
like,
the, it's the
that.
auntie glove. for me.
Yeah, bro.
It
Like,
is.
what is we doing? This is the
It's like he
X-Men
got
'97
it's like
too.
he got sliced
97.
like
Good
mid
love it,
chest.
What?
Nah.
So, what's your vote? Drop.
Drop.
This is drop.
Drop.
Nah, this is
Drop.
drop.
This is a drop.
Damn, what chat saying?
Chad
Drop.
saying drop, drop,
All I see is
drop.
drops. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, the bicep gloves. Oh, wild. Koza says. All right, let's see.
Who rocking it better?
Vegeta.
Oh, Vegeta, of course.
Come on now, do you see that?
We're going always
Got the short boots, got
Yeah.
the ankle boots,
Yeah.
got the gloves,
The Hawk boots is crazy.
got the chest armor.
Yeah, the chest
Look
armor
at him.
is-
He
is-
got
I'ma-
the
I'ma-
the
I'ma be a
leggings,
little
got the
controversial.
bodysuit.
I'll be a little controversial.
It's giving body.
Vegeta's
yada,
fit
yada, yada,
does
yada.
Vegeta's fit does look better. But if you ask me which one I'll wear, I'll
Mhm.
wear that one. I like the jacket.
Okay.
Nah.
The vest looks cool.
Vegeta's fit is better. I would prefer to wear that one though. In real life,
With your
I
toes
prefer
out?
to wear. That's the only shit that's pissing me off.
Nah.
But them little elf shoes ain't rocking neither. I'm
His-
just saying.
He got the
Guys,
Gucci 3000.
guys
Right,
saying
right,
say
you're
toes
right.
is out
The
with
toes out is
the
killing
leg
it.
warmers. He got leg warmers on.
Like what?
Yeah, your toes is.
I'm gonna say Vegeta because aesthetically it looks better.
That's what I'm saying. He got the bodysuit.
But which one
on.
I would personally wear? That jacket is with the
toes out.
with
Yeah.
nah, you see the
Yeah.
Stop picking that.
Nah, the toes is
Yo,
out.
That
matters.
You need a good
Full
manicure to
outfit.
rock toes
What I'm
out
saying
with
is,
leg
When
warmers.
Jesus did it, it was cool though.
He got joggers.
Jesus
on with
ain't had leg warmers on after.
He
He
got-
didn't need them.
He got joggers on with leg warmers. Like what?
Okay.
Nah.
Okay. So
Nah.
everybody say Vegeta.
It's Vegeta.
I like them both though.
Yeah.
They both drips to me.
Nah.
We missing the Shinobi Ninja.
Yeah,
belt
you
here.
got the belt going
Yeah,
on.
we
there.
got- I
That's
missed
like
that.
the only thing he got going for him is the
A
belt.
I
jacket
missed that.
though.
No.
Okay.
They said no, Vegeta it is.
We making everybody sassy in here today.
Me. Okay. Clock it.
Okay.
This is the Flash from the actual movie, live action. This is just fit.
I don't
Okay.
hate it. I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I like the boots.
He
Does
look.
a gold shine all like that all the time?
No.
He looks
That's
like
when
Big
he's
Red
flashing up.
Gum.
Oh, see, yeah, definitely.
The gold
that's
is
a,
powered
that's
up by
a
him.
drip. That is a drip right there. When he powers up, the gold be lighting up.
Drip. Okay.
He
She said
looks
she
like
did all of this. She-
Without the
It's a
gold, he
drip.
looks like a used tampon. I don't know. Like I'm not really going for that. Yeah.
Have you seen that many used tampons?
that part.
Nah. Mm.
What you say?
That was very
That's drip? What you
explicit.
say?
Nah.
It's cool.
It's cool. I'm borderline.
Drip.
Hold on. Let me see what chat's saying. Let me see what chat's saying.
They say drip, drip. Some say drop. Baldoni said drop.
Well, we gotta count these up because it's getting good.
Yeah. Everybody else says drip.
So it's mostly drip. What do you say?
I'm saying drop.
Crazy one.
You saying drop? I can see why though. It looks like you got on wrestling boots.
Yeah, got the wrestling boots on.
Okay, but
These are
wrestling
wrestling
boots are
boots.
fire.
Nah,
But wrestling boots are fire. What are you talking about?
I don't know where I want to go with this.
Are you running
Because
fast or
you
jumping
know
over
why?
top rope?
You
What
know
we
what?
doing?
I know what it looks like.
Both.
Not lit up.
You can run and then jump off the top rope.
No,
What are you talking about?
No.
That's versatile.
Oh
it's
my
it's
God.
giving Big Red
All
Gum.
right.
He can-
I'm gonna
he
go
can
drip.
flash
I'm
run
gonna go
into
drip,
an
but it
elbow
barely
drop.
made it.
Like,
It barely
what?
made it. I'm gonna go drip, but it barely made it. It barely made it.
And then you say when he's not doing the flash shit, that yellow
Yeah,
that
the
goes
yellow,
is
yeah.
going. Yeah.
That's when it's a drop. When he just plain
Horrible.
red.
So
Oh, did I? Drop.
What is this?
That's Peacemaker.
That's
Peacemaker.
That's John Cena.
That was
John
a whack
Cena.
movie anyway. That's a
It's
drop.
a show. I heard the show.
It's a show. He got
I-
two. It's actually
I
pretty good.
hate-
The show is actually pretty good.
I hated this look for him all the time.
But that's what Peacemaker looks like.
Yeah, that's.
He
As-
looked like
I-
a Boy
I say
Scout
this.
that never wanted to grow
No,
up.
I say this though. As per portrayal of the actual character, that's it.
Yeah,
Whether you like it or
one
not,
to
is
one.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's it. 1-to-1. That's it.
I mean, that's fine. It's still ugly.
Yeah, there you go.
That's drop.
I'm a little
He
fucked
looked like
up
a-
with it. He
he
plays
looked-
it so well. I like it. You
nah,
get what I'm saying? Like
nah. I'm sorry. He looked like a
the
Boy
out, the
Scout
fit is
that
dropped.
was like.
I dropped.
The
Alright.
the
I'm not
actor
gonna
and the
He killing it.
the
Yeah,
the
he
character
He
It's
killing
like
it.
the
Nah,
show,
you right.
yeah,
Nah, we
yeah.
talking about the fit. We talking about the
Yeah,
fit.
talking about the fit.
I'm gonna do
At
drop.
first
I'm gonna do
look,
drop.
huge drop.
It's like corny cool. You get what I'm saying?
Like, how
Like
are we even seeing him right now? I'm just saying.
Yeah, it dropped. Chat even said drop too. Ooh, Electro.
Well, I don't know. I don't like the sunflower face.
Electro.
It's the
I
it's the
hate
mask.
this.
I hate the mask.
and you want to know what? This is the best picture I could find of it. This
I
shit
don't
is
like the
corny as
mask.
fuck.
Nah,
This shit is corny as fuck.
He
I
looked
like-
like
I
he
hate
could
this
stand in
nigga.
a
I
field of
I didn't
sunflowers
really
and-
like I didn't really like Electro like that. I like Shaka better.
Shaka,
I don't like
Shaka
the
look
mask.
corny
like-
than a motherfucker.
Shaka look like
Don't
the
talk
Snoop.
about
mask
just the
kill it
fit.
for
That
me.
shit trash.
The mask is killing it.
It's
The
for
not
me.
mask
it.
is what ruins it.
I didn't.
It's like,
if he chucked the mask, it's
If
cool.
he got rid of the
Or-
mask,
or
it'd be
laid
alright.
it
Or
back.
right,
Or laid it
something
back.
Yeah,
different,
into the
yeah.
mask.
Have the
yeah,
lightning
yeah.
going back like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
instead of just out. Like I
Yeah.
get what they're trying to do because it's sparking lightning, but it's just
That's
not it.
That's a drop.
Nah.
It's a drop. See what chat
You
saying.
got a
What you say,
starfish on
Mono?
your face, like
I was drop. I like the color, but the outfit.
The colorway is cool.
Yeah, the
color
but-
cool, but the
Looking
mask
at
is
it,
whack.
the
Koza
mask is
says,
throwing
yeah.
it off, right.
The
That
mask,
mask
he
is
looks
not-
like
like, who
Captain
designed
Starfruit.
this?
Thank you, Baldoni.
Captain
Exactly.
Starfruit. Jesus Christ.
Damn, that
No,
shit trash.
nobody likes this. Ooh.
Versus.
Ooh.
First of all, I don't want to know which one drip or drop yet. Which one y'all prefer?
That one.
Who killing it?
I'm killing it. I'm killing
I'm
it.
talking about just the fit. Just the fit.
Just the fit.
Now who
Look
you
at
Static.
prefer? Just the
Static.
fit.
Listen. No.
Fuck
Static.
out of here. That
No,
shit.
that is just
That
fire.
nigga is
He-
killing it.
He
son.
just
He's
looked
got the
cool with the
jacket.
greaseless
That
jacket.
fit
No,
is
no.
He got the shit on the hip.
Nah,
He
man.
wilding right now. He
No,
murdering it. He
With
murdering
the-
it. No way.
Fuck that.
Sis.
Static.
Oh my
No.
god.
Give me
Y'all
that.
just gotta be some niggas.
Like,
Static,
He got a freaking
static
curtain
jacket is
back.
fire.
That boy, no,
Nah,
no, that's
Nah.
that fit fire.
Static,
That's
static
fire.
jacket is fire, bro. Come
Give
on.
me that shit.
Nah,
That shit
no.
fire. Who
No,
you got,
see,
kid?
see, that's it's nice, but
Shut
that
up,
is
nigga.
like elevated.
Come
Like,
on.
He
he's
look like
fire,
No,
but
Static,
he's
they fly too.
fire.
They both drip.
So
They
Nah,
both
they both
drip.
drip, but
this
that
fit look like he about to slick the hair back and be on
good.
He
the
might slick the
greasers
head
or
back.
Little Shop
That's
of Horror
Mr. Steal Your Girl
type
right
shit.
there.
Get this shit
listen,
out of
that fit.
here.
That's what I'm saying.
That
That's
fit?
Mr. Steal Your Girl
Oh
right
my
there.
Get
God,
this
that's
out of
a,
here.
that's
Just
you
listen,
wildin'.
mm-mm.
Let me see what this chat say.
He's like one color from being in the Beat It video. Like
Good.
What is
That
wrong
was
with
like
that?
the best video.
What's wrong with that?
He's one color, just
What's
red
wrong
on the
with
jacket.
it?
Beat It
Beat
video.
It.
Like,
What's
Okay,
wrong with
and
that?
that's a dope ass
Nah.
video.
I want to be next to Mike,
He
nigga. and
He
all
got
of that
the
shit.
dance, right,
With
the
the
dance
jacket
moves,
on and
with
all
the
of
dance
that.
moves. Throw it back.
I'm gonna have the mean clocks
Static
on with
shot.
that
Got the
fit.
glove.
I'm rolling with Static. This is fire.
It is fire.
That's
Don't,
like-
don't
It
forget
is
the
fire.
disc.
That one.
Huh?
You win this.
All the way. All the way.
That one is fire.
All the way,
Nah,
nigga.
nah, give me this one here. I
Give me
can-
that
You
shit.
just like that in real life. What
Right.
you talking
What you
about?
mean? I'm saying which one of these shit
You
look
just
more
said you have
flyer,
the best
nigga.
with your toes out. What you
What you
talking
mean?
about?
I'm going over here with it.
Let's see. Chat says, Trini said the mask.
Superboy,
That
right?
was the other
Superboy,
Superboy for Big Brooklyn. Baldoni Super Shock, Static Shock.
Static
Then
Shock.
Dirty Dan says Static.
Superboy.
Ant says Superboy. M says, oh, hi Big B, hi Dan. Talking to y'all. And then yep, Connor. BK Jackson says Connor.
Kind of, that's Superboy.
That's Superboy. Okay.
I think Superboy wins.
All right. I guess if y'all take it, he wins.
They both drips though. No, there's no shade on either one.
I'm rolling with
There's
Static.
no
That-
shade. There's no drop up here.
Right.
There's
Listen,
no drop. But you talking about
if Su-
fashion?
if
That
Static
nigga
Shock
is
tried to
murdering
holler at
it
me,
right
I'd be
now.
like,
That
oh
was a good,
hey,
a good,
hi, yes, you can have my number. If
versus-
Superboy rolled up on me, I'd have been like, oh,
Listen to the lady. Listen to the lady. Listen to
Let's
the
go
lady.
right now.
With this, but with this belt, right?
With the little spiky shit
We can
right
go on a
here.
date right now. We can go
With
right
the open
now.
finger
You not
gloves,
feeling that
though?
though? I'm mad at you right now. I'm so mad at you. You been letting me down all day. What you do? What you do?
I ain't do
What
nothing.
you? You
Goddamn
did
thing.
something.
No,
I'm blaming
I
you.
did not.
I'm blaming you.
Goddamn thing.
Listen, Dan, I like Static Shock.
You bias.
No.
That's like
I'm
Bruno
just
Mars right there.
Yeah,
Yo.
he does.
What's wrong with Bruno Mars? He got
like
great
him, but-
songs.
Good music, great artist.
You see
Love
this
him.
shit?
Love
I go
24
through this
Karat
every
album, but
I go through
Nah.
this all the time.
Oh, please.
How you?
Oh, please. What's the next one?
Look
Let's
at that fit though. Who's
Oh.
doing it better?
come on. Is that a question, bro?
Hey,
Come
hey,
on.
Hey.
Come on.
People say Jin Woo's the
His
swag
ga-
is the new aura
Bro,
guy.
his
Dante.
game is all about stylish
Yeah,
all
Dante.
day
Look at
long.
that
Hey.
coat. Look at that red coat. Come on
I'm
now.
just asking the question.
You want
Listen.
to go against Ebony and Ivory with the sword?
No, I'm voting for Dante
He-
too.
Dante
on.
got the
He is swagging though. I ain't
he
gonna
got
lie.
nah.
He
He's
is-
swagging, but
he
he
is
got
aura for him,
he
but
got
he
a
ain't touching
regular.
Dante.
He looked like a YN
Huh?
today. Just picked up some power
He
sword.
got some like.
Nah, definitely not. I'm
He
going
got on
Dante.
a Hanes t-shirt and some regular joggers. Look at what he got on.
Boy
He-
fresh,
with
boy
the
fresh.
boots,
The boots is
With
fresh.
with the jacket.
And that jacket with two coats flying.
You know he spent a good penny on that jacket.
Yeah, nah, that's bread.
That's
That's
Good
good
money.
quality
That's
shit right
Good
there.
money.
That's
money.
good. You ever go to them goth stores and see at the price? It'd be like $2,000 for them big ass boots. Them shits
That's
ain't
what
cheap.
I'm saying.
Them shits
Like,
ain't cheap.
Well made.
It's
That's
Nah,
a
them shits is dead ass
well-made
shit
outfit.
with the skulls on it, with the iron shit on it. That costs money,
Yeah,
nigga.
it's Jin Woo thing is not it.
Jin Woo is kind of like, oh, I guess I had to get up today. I mean, the jacket's nice, but
Yeah, he
just
looked like a regular
he looked like he
YN
just
today,
rolled out
but
of
just
bed
was like,
and
you know
came
what? I
out.
got powers.
he rolled out of bed and was like, I guess I could put this jacket on.
How I'm feeling today.
Yep, everybody says Dante. So,
Dante one.
Galaxy's in the building. Type of bomb.
Galaxy.
You missed the court case, Johnny. Bravo.
Dribble drop.
That's drip.
Dribble drop.
That's drip. I had.
I love me some
I had
see
that
the
on
flex
the
on
other
that
day.
You see the flex on him now? Yo,
That's-
listen.
I had
Drip.
this on the other day.
Johnny
I had
Bravo
a black
got
t-shirt with some
swag.
blue
That's your
jeans
regular
and my
cool nigga
Yeezys.
fit,
Right
you know what I
there.
mean?
Cool nigga fit.
Some
Johnny
jeans.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Johnny Bravo got the swag. He
That's
got
Versace,
the
nigga.
swag.
That's drip all
All
the
them
way.
girls that wasn't giving him no play, they was just haters.
They was
Yeah.
They was just
Come
hating.
on.
Yeah,
Come
Big
on.
Brooklyn said calm fit. Exactly. That's the calm fit right there. You
Calm
drippy.
fit. Yep, Coach said hair always on point.
Always on
Always.
point. My nigga with
Not a
the-
strand out of
always
place.
on point.
Not a
Stay
strand
fresh.
out of place.
Stay clean. So that was an easy one.
Who the hell is that?
Hold on. That is actually Disco Nightwing. That's Nightwing. That's
Disco
What
Nightwing.
is
Nah.
disco? Why is the disco preface?
Nah, I mean, if he was going to a
If
party,
you type in Disco Nightwing,
but
that's
I
what
wouldn't
comes
want
up.
him trying to
So that
save
must
my
be like
life.
some alternate
He
universe.
looked
No, this
like,
was canon. Yes, this is canon.
He looked like he'll flashbang you.
This is like
His outfit.
Disco era Nightwing. I don't know what the
Oh,
fuck was
okay.
going on.
Maybe it was hot back then.
Yeah.
It's
Maybe it was
I mean, I guess if he
You
was
can't
in the
really
He was,
say.
70s,
he was killing them back then.
Yeah.
I guess
Son
if
had the shit.
Maybe they was reading that shit like, yo, this
I gotta get me some college, nigga.
I could just
Hey,
picture
yo.
him jumping off a building going, oh!
he gonna break out of dance moves, like, nah, I don't know about
back
that.
then, that probably was
That was killing them back
It's
then.
giving.
They was like, oh my god.
chest out just like how they
Nigga, whooping your ass while dancing, nigga. Let me see what chat say. Let me see what chat say.
Oh,
Drop.
nah, this ain't it. He looked like he
It's a
he
drop.
do mad
It's a
coke.
drop.
Nah, so
And
I'm
then I
sorry,
put
I
it back in the
disagree.
category like corny
I feel
food.
like if this was the 70s, that would have been hard.
That's back in
He
that
was an
time.
Austin
though.
Powers cold
He would have
member.
showed up to
You see,
Studio
you see this
54
built to
like,
have that shirt open look.
Yeah.
Little bit of chest.
No way.
You see the inspiration though.
Koza said he looked like David Bowie, and Don Trill said he looked like he was an Austin Powers cold member.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's it.
Oh man, it's a drop though.
Yeah, it's drop. It's drop.
What y'all think about
Aquaman.
this? The real live action movie version.
Jason
It's
Momoa, Aquaman is.
the orange and green always came off corny. Aquaman's fit always came off a little cheese, but me
I don't hate
personally,
it. I don't hate it.
I think this version, I think in live action, I think they pulled it off.
I don't hate it. I like
I
it.
know. I think they
It's
pulled
like
it
I like
off.
it.
gold,
I
right?
like it.
It's not yellow. It's more like gold.
It,
Right here.
that,
I
that's
like
gold.
it. I like it.
Yeah,
I
it's-
like
I
it.
would say drip. They pulled it off.
Yeah,
I say drip.
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 I'd rock with it.
That's
If-
a hard
if they-
fit to
if
pull
they
off and
threw,
make drippy. That's a hard design to pull off and make drippy.
I think
say
if we
drip.
just do like the glass, the
I
Trenton
do agree.
glasses
The
on it, the
comic
color of them,
version.
like
what glasses?
like some regular, Ray Bans or some smooth shit.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
he's
he's
on
in
the
the
water.
ocean,
You know,
right?
yeah.
Like,
So goggles then, give him some. Give him
But
some
he don't
no,
need
no,
goggles.
he
His
don't
eyes
need
is
goggles.
okay with that. So it
He's
wouldn't make
all right.
sense. It's
But
not
I,
even
I,
make
I
sense.
think the goggles would
Just
have
for the
made
fit,
it
though, for
corny.
the fit.
I think the goggles
I
would have
actually
made
think
it
the
corny.
goggles could work, but he just don't need it.
Yeah, I agree
You
with
would just be
Foxy. The
adding
goggles
layers.
would have made it
The
corny.
goggles would have made
Yes,
it
I
corny.
can see that.
Let's see what
It's a drip. That's what chat saying.
Let's see what chat says. Chat says, I agree, GK drip. Ant said drop. Old Mermaid Man and SpongeBob head ass. He said, yeah, he stole Mermaid Man. Look for real.
He's what
Yo,
Mermaid Man
Mermaid
could
Man
have
stole
been.
his look.
If Mermaid Man would have
Right.
worked out, he would
Mermaid
have.
Man stole
you
his
know?
look. He been doing that since the 70s or 60s or some shit.
Mermaid Man was born in the 70s and 60s.
Mermaid Man is from where?
SpongeBob.
Come on, man. He
SpongeBob.
came out.
That's old as he's like, evil!
Fuck out of here.
Evil!
All right, so we say drip, right?
That's drip, yeah.
Question for Jack.
Question for chat. What is the original drip?
Is this
Okay.
Oh, I mean, come on now. He got the
Aura
pants.
farming.
He got the pants, the cape
Aura
with the
farming.
shoulder, and I don't really like shoulder pads like that, but like he
He's
made it
Muslim. That's
work.
the Muslim man's outfit.
He made it
This
work.
nigga is so black.
Aura farming.
I would say yes.
Aura
Yes.
farming.
He's been doing it before it was a thing.
Right.
100%.
Piccolo just with the cape.
And then when he take it
We
off,
know he about to lose, but the nigga's still dripping.
Yeah.
right? Like it made you think twice. Like you knew you were
This
stronger
nigga
than
might
him.
win, nigga.
Right? You knew you were stronger than him, but you was like, wait a minute.
Let's take
You remember
this
when he
ass
was
shit
fighting?
off.
What is it, Android? And he came with that circle kick. There was no need for that Piccolo. There was no need for that.
Aura
There
farming.
was no need for that.
Nigga 720 spin
Nigga
kick.
came with a spin
Wow.
kick. That was crazy.
Shit out of it.
I would say, yeah, this is one of the original Drip Kings right here.
Yeah. DBZ said black man still gonna get fucked up in this movie. Damn, fucked up. Baldoni said he would come in looking like this and get his ass kicked.
But
That's
he
okay.
kept coming in fresh though.
It made you second
He
guess.
was.
Like,
He was one of the
wait a
first
minute.
niggas that made them little
He
elf
looked
shoes
serious.
cool.
Yeah.
Yup.
Them little elf shoes was never cool. Nigga.
Right. Even a cummerbund. He made a cummerbund look cool.
Boy, he was dripping.
Just saying.
Dripping. Look at
He
the
just
shoulder. Like
put
she said,
random
the shoulder
pieces of
pad.
fabric
The
together and
nigga's
made
wearing
it
a
work.
turban.
Yeah.
Rocking a turban.
Turban with pointy ass shoulders.
And a cape.
100-pound turban.
Bro.
Yeah.
He just put fabric.
Bro.
He just put fabric together, and it was like, damn.
He did it before Rock Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Exactly.
Time for round two.
Round two.
Hey y'all. Ooh.
Drip or drop.
That's drip fire. I thought
I don't like the coat with.
Is it a
jeans.
white beater or is it a t-shirt?
That's a white beater.
That's a
White
white
beater.
beater.
That's a white beater.
I don't like it with
That's a
the coat
beater.
and the jeans. I feel like he should have been wearing like khakis or some dress pants. Like I don't like it put together. I like the pieces separate.
Yeah.
I don't like it together.
I like it together.
Yeah, the jeans
That's
is
the hood.
Just
shit.
I thought it was a t-shirt, so I was like,
Yeah,
ah.
it's a white beater.
That's a white beater.
So the white beater is what kills it for me. But
It's
t-shirt.
it's
for
a
me.
drop for me. I like the coat. I like the shoes. I like the jeans. I don't like it together.
Yeah.
I
So
don't
if
know.
I'm going by the
I'm
look,
stuck. I
if
don't
I'm
know.
going by the
conflicted.
look, it's
I'm
a
still
drop.
gonna say it's a drip for me.
Nah, it's a drop for me.
Ant said drop. Koza said drip.
The jeans.
Ant
is
said
whack.
those pants. You talking about those pants is a drop for him. Then the jeans, Dontrell said jeans is whack. Ant said just look at the zippers all the way to the ankles. Damn. All
Now
right, I
the
see
jeans
that.
are fire.
Me too.
I
Jeans
just
is hard.
don't like it.
I'm-
Like
I'm
I don't
Now
like it
Donnie
together.
said drop too.
Not
I like more of it than I dislike of it. So I'm gonna go.
Big
drip.
Brooklyn said looks like a girl's coat.
Nah, I
I
feel
don't
like
think
it.
so.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. It's because
I feel
it's
like
woolly. That's why.
yeah, on a girl, I feel like it would look too big.
Right.
I like it enough to say drip, but I see what y'all saying.
It's-
Something's missing to make it
It's drip for
what
me.
it's supposed to be, but I'm gonna still say
I
drip.
think if he, at least if he had on like an actual shirt, I probably would like it better.
The wife beater made it too casual for that level of a fit.
Right.
Koza
That's
said
what's
I,
throwing it off.
Koza said I would wear that fit to church.
Hey, hallelujah.
Maybe he was just running to the phone store.
Hey, real. Hey, you know what I mean?
Dontrell said nah, because the girl would get it fitted to her. makes sense.
Yeah.
I would still say drip. I'm sorry. I got
It's still drip for me too.
I'm so
Drop.
You gotta pick
Drop
one.
for
Drip or
me.
drop.
It's a drop for me.
I'd say drip.
Gotta go. It's
come
more.
on.
You know what I
Let's,
mean?
let's
Like,
go. Let's go. Okay.
I got
A,
issues
a
with this
hoodie,
outfit.
a hoodie with the Sherlock Holmes trench coat.
That's what
That's-
fucks it up for me.
That is ugly.
That's what kills it.
That
for
is
me.
ugly, and I'm so mad that this
But
picture is
I
even in here.
understand something though.
I feel
Wait,
like
hold on. I kind of understand. Like, you see, the hoodie is causing the coat to have a buffered look. That's what she was going for. But the hoodie itself is thrown off the fit.
No, I don't like. She got on the freaking strap leggings with the
Yeah, I
like.
see it,
Come
I see
on
it,
now, like,
I
are you
see
going
it.
to dance
But there's
class? or you-
potential there though.
No,
If she didn't have the hoodie, it might have
If you
did.
didn't have the hoodie, the coat wouldn't look that good on her.
no,
It would look baggy.
The shades on.
The
No.
shades is the nastiest part for me.
Yeah, that was.
The shades is nasty.
Is
That's
she-
the
I don't know
nastiest
if
part.
she's
It
going
looked
to-
like the shades glow in the
I
dark
don't know
or
if
light
she's
up.
What
going-
are those? What are you saying?
I'm like, I don't know if she's going to aerobics class. Is she going
That's the thing. That's
scuba
I'm
diving?
there with
Like,
you on that.
like
I don't know
what
where
is
we're
happening
going.
right now?
That coat is too sophisticated for that fit.
Yeah.
That glasses is too goofy for that fit.
I agree with
You get what I'm
Koza.
saying?
She's 100% asking for the manager.
Yeah, she's a,
Ah,
oh my
man.
god.
I'm gonna say drop for one reason. The coat's the only thing saving it, and it's not enough to drip it.
No.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So I'm gonna go
everything
drop.
else is just.
But that coat is fire.
Yeah,
though.
because the hoodie is there, like Dontrell said.
The hoodie and the
Without the
glasses.
hoodie, it's fine.
That glasses too.
The glasses. What are you doing with
Them
those?
glasses is nasty work. That's
That's-
nasty business.
They look like they light up or glow in the dark. Either way.
That's nasty business. And them the hook on the leggings.
Yeah.
What are we doing with that?
Yeah, I
What
mean,
she was trying something. She was trying something. All right, so it's a drop.
It's like she's trying to go back and forward in time.
I don't know what's going on here.
Well, I like that. I like that.
I like that.
I like it.
yeah, that's cool.
I like it. I like it. It's
It's giving
unique.
crisscross.
It's unique enough that it's like at first you're like I don't think I could pull it off
Them boots
myself.
is hitting though.
Yeah, I don't think I
Yeah.
could pull this off myself.
I like
but
it.
I like it.
I like
I
it.
like
I like
it
the
on
little
her.
buckles coming down the pants.
Yeah, I like it
Yeah.
on her.
That red coat cardigan, that shit is hitting.
Yeah.
With the green, with the green
fit
fit, but it
yeah.
worked.
This is
But the
drip.
green
This
matched
is
the
drip.
boots though. That's what
This
it
is
is.
drip. This is drip.
That's drip.
I
all
feel
the
like
way.
if she had changed the boot color, I wouldn't have liked it as much. Like I feel
No,
like
that
everything.
boot color had to be
Yeah, if
right
it was
there.
black, it wouldn't.
That
go.
boot color had to, because everything is setting off the colors.
Yeah, because if
You
she
see what
had
I'm
did
saying?
like
Yeah.
She went
red
bright
boots
here,
or like
bright
green
here,
boots, I don't.
and she muted it down here. That's
This
a
is
drip.
drip.
Young and
This is drip.
Mayweather, this Dontrell said.
Nah, that shit fire. She killed that.
Kind of like this.
I like
she
it.
crushed
She
that. That's
usually-
early 2000s drip.
I couldn't wear it because it won't
Early
look
two-
right on me,
That's
but
right,
it would look good on
right
her.
now too, because the baggy is back.
Yeah.
So usually we go celebrities, but I figure let me look at regular niggas. You feel me?
Yeah.
Just look at the drip.
Yeah, this is dope.
Yeah,
this is dope. Like I said, it's giving crisscross. Like the pants look like they're backwards.
My favorite piece is that cardigan though.
Yeah.
Yeah, cardigan.
Cardigan and the boots. Them boots is stupid.
Yeah. And the New York. Can't forget
Can't,
the
yeah,
New York.
listen, can't
Yeah.
go wrong with that.
Yeah, gotta hit the New York for that.
I fucks with it.
Yeah,
I fucks with it.
Oh,
I
the
fucks
color,
with it.
the
I don't
color of the
know.
boots
What you mean?
matches this one.
I'm on the
You see,
fence.
that, right?
I'm on the
Yeah.
Oh,
fence.
usually we get in a row with this game.
Nah, the boots is killing.
The boots is killing
Like
it for
killing
me.
it, like no good.
Killing me.
Like
I don't like the boot
I don't
design,
like the
like the
boots.
actual boot
I like the
themselves,
boots,
but
though.
the
I
coordination
don't
of the
mind
boots.
the boots.
The coordination of the boots to the outfit
Yeah,
works for me.
it works.
But the
Yeah.
actual
I don't know if
boot
I
I
like
don't
the
like.
I like it. I'm not gonna lie to y'all.
I don't
I like
hate
it
it.
calm,
I
but
don't
dripping.
hate it. I don't hate it.
I
I,
gotta see the boot, like see it.
You don't like the boot?
I'll say
From
drip.
him?
I'll say drip because it
I
don't
don't know.
look bad.
Right.
Like
Yeah,
I
but
don't
it's like-
individually like the piece, but it don't look
Yeah.
bad. So
I like
I'll
it.
say
Yeah,
drip.
I like it.
I like what Big Brooklyn said. They said drip minus the boots. Some regular constructs would have been better. Yeah, some butters. Some butters
Some
would have
butters
been
would've been
fine.
better.
But the butters could work, but that worked too though.
Yeah, I like the boots.
I like the boots too. You can throw a nice jacket over that too. Kill
Maybe
it.
that's what's
No,
missing.
Jackie-
Like, I
Jackie
feel like
goes
it's just
roll
like
outside. You can throw a big puffer over
I
that.
feel like because he got the hat on, like maybe without the hat or with a jacket
like
on,
the hat,
maybe I
though.
would feel different. No, I don't hate the hat, but I
Right.
feel like maybe that's what's not making it sink
Right.
for me. But I don't hate it, so I'm gonna say drip.
Ant said the green and pink throwing off the fit.
But the
No,
boots
nah,
is
I like
the
the- I like
boots
the
is
green
married
and the
in both
pink.
colors.
Yeah, the green and pink is a
The
good
boots
color
is marrying
contrast.
both
to each other.
colors, and the hat and that little shirt matches. I see what he did there.
Right. I see.
see what he
I
did
see
there.
the mission,
I
and
see
it
the
was
vision.
mission done.
I see the vision.
The vision
I see
was,
the vision.
was
You gotta
done.
know how colors. You gotta mute certain colors in between. You
Right,
get what I'm
right.
saying? I think he killed it. I dropped.
Don
Drip all
said
the
the
way.
colorway is fine. Why the pants so baggy though?
It's a baggy fit. I see
a
what
baggy
he did with that
fit.
too. Yeah.
Peak coat would go with this.
A pea coat would
A
go
pea
hard
coat.
with
Yeah, you can throw a
those.
nice coat over there or a jacket.
A
Maybe
pea-
that's what's missing.
a
Like
pea coat with
like
this,
a gray
with
pea coat.
a crew neck sweater
Yeah,
and them boots and that
maybe not
hat, a pea coat.
Maybe not a pea coat, but you can throw a jacket over that.
That's the Victor Sweet hat for real.
Nah, I say drip.
I say drip.
I'd say drip.
I'll give it drip. I would.
Oh yes,
That's fabulous.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, I like that sweater.
fantastic.
That sweater
Fabulous.
is murderous.
That is
That
fantastic.
sweater
The
is
glasses.
even. I'm just about to say the glasses.
The glasses.
I was just about to say the
fit,
glasses.
Yeah.
The
With that-
shoes.
I love that green running color
Yeah.
that she got going on.
Yeah.
Killing it.
Yeah.
Killing it. It's like swaggy elegance.
Yeah.
Yes.
Murder.
Drip.
Drip all the way.
Drip,
Drip,
yeah.
drip, drip.
Drip.
Everybody hitting the drip button. Yep. You gotta get a drip and drop button too. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah,
get one.
yeah.
I'll work on it.
Drip.
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 I love it. I love.
I'm
I
gonna go
mean,
drip.
I don't like the pants
I'm gonna say one thing.
because they come up too high.
Yeah, they way
But
too
I'm okay. I
I
like
wish
it.
the
I
green
love
was white.
No.
Nah, it's
No,
perfect.
I think the green was white because
The
she got the white.
colors-
She got the
the
white
white shirt,
muted.
the white
The
back,
white in
and the
between
white
is what's
shoes.
holding
I
everything
want
together.
to see more of the
The
shirt.
The white, that little white
if
shirt
she
is what's,
had
is
like
what's
some
holding
low
everything.
rise.
Here's what I give it compliments to. I don't like jeans on jeans. You
Okay.
gotta know how to put. I don't like
And
jeans
she-
jacket
she
and jeans
broke it
pants
up.
at the same color. I think it's so corny. It's a cop out.
But she
I
broke
don't
it
like
up.
I don't like it.
She broke
I
it
don't
up
like
in
it.
a really
But
good way.
if you could pull it off,
I
she
feel
did
like
that.
if she had on a
Because
white
it's not exactly the
bodysuit
same.
with
It's
low
still
rise
drip to me.
jeans, that would have made it even better.
is it a what?
A white bodysuit with some low rise jeans, that would have made it even better.
Okay. I can see where you're going with that.
What you
Shoulder
say,
I
belly.
say drip.
Right?
Drip? What you like about it or dislike about it?
I like the jacket.
With the
I
jeans
like the
jacket?
No, both of the jacket with the green.
I like the way
green
she
make
did
it
that.
pop.
The
You see the
layers.
long coat,
Yeah,
the
the green make
that's
it
layering
pop.
right there.
The layers.
That's layering
Not
right
crazy
there.
about the pants either, 'cause it's gonna be
That's
hot.
probably
Yeah,
a
it's just
few
too
Cole's
years
up,
back.
Cole's
I
apparently
like it.
agrees with you. Drop too much denim.
What's this
I
trend
What's
of
this
can't
wearing?
fault
trend
him
of
for that.
wearing
Denim,
like
you
2-3
gotta be able to pull
coats?
that up. I think she broke the colors nice with that green.
I
and
think
little
because
bit of
it
white in between.
jackets, it's okay. It's not like a coat. It's like a
I just hate
jacket.
those pants, Lord.
Why? I don't mind the pants,
Nah, they
They
too
go way
high.
too high,
but
bro.
the
And then they
pants.
cuff. They
the
cuff at
high
the bottom
rise,
down
but that's what I was
there.
about to say. Those boots with the cuff. That's what she did.
Yeah, but the pants ain't
The-
gonna be that high. I could've
she
been
just
wasting
need
it.
different
But
pants,
it's
bro.
high rise pants. I like high rise
I
pants.
fucking hate those shit.
I don't like that internal one.
You don't like. I like waist high jeans. I like it. I think
No,
it's cute.
I like
That's
waist high
fine.
jeans too. I
That's
like
good.
them, but
That's what you got on.
for this outfit, no.
For this
I'm
outfit,
a low
yes.
rise kind of
No.
person.
I'm fighting y'all. Y'all gonna leave
Like,
short
Nah,
low
she
rise
gotta be
jeans.
wearing.
Y'all gonna
She
leave
gotta
that
be
black
wearing the
queen
bodysuit
alone.
with the
Leave the
V.
black
With the
queen
she
alone.
gotta be
Right,
wearing.
right.
Nah, she
Jump
gotta
on,
be.
please.
She gotta be wearing a
My
bodysuit
sister like
with the
that.
V,
She's
with the
fine
V,
as a
with the
motherfucker.
V out, with
Right.
a little bit of.
Right.
But
Yes.
okay, so we all drip anyway, right?
It's a
Drip.
drip
Those said
anyway.
the pants up to her shoulders, right?
Damn.
Damn, y'all evil.
Ant say he agree with you too much
Hipsters,
denim.
man. We need hipsters.
That's what I'm saying. She wore a bodysuit with some low rise,
want
which got the little
pants to go
hips
to the
out.
neck.
Like I said, I still would call it a drip.
Yeah, drip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nah, it's definitely true.
Skullhead lumberjack.
I fucks with it, man. I don't know, man.
It's very loud.
It is loud.
What's up, bro?
I'm not saying that I
Hey,
would
Cash,
wear
what's
it,
up, bro? Drop
but
about
I
hey,
think
Cash.
it's fire. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that I would wear it,
Do
but
I
I'm not
think
mad
it's
at it.
I wouldn't wear it.
But I'm not mad at it.
I wouldn't wear it.
It's drip.
not the
It's
stuff
for
that-
someone that's tatted like he is.
Right.
To pull it off.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna say because I wouldn't wear this drop. It's fire.
I say drip.
Koza
I
said
say
big
drip.
drip.
Big, yeah.
A tan
I
shirt,
can see
maybe.
Koza wearing this.
A tan shirt could rock
A
too.
tan one.
That's
I'm-
what
I
we
could
see.
I
agree
think
with you
this
with
would
that.
look fire on Koza, to be honest.
Yeah.
And he'd have he'd have
Yeah,
the
he got
fitted
the
on.
style for
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
even if he wore it just without, I feel like this would be perfect.
Yeah,
for Koza.
that's
I can
close to
see, I
style.
can see
Yeah,
a
yeah.
tan shirt though, CJ.
A tan shirt
Or
to the
an
white.
olive.
But the jumper
Sure.
Or
really
the
got-
like the olive green. Yeah.
That would be fire.
Yeah. If it was that, I would be like, yeah, that's all.
Oh,
Yeah,
he said
damn, it said big drop.
Big
Damn.
drop.
He was like,
This is big drop.
Big
Nah,
drop
I
for
like
me.
it. I like it. I like it.
Rock.
Big drop.
He said.
So say open the window and throw it out.
He said.
But those not even butters he got on his feet.
Nah, those aren't butters.
Nah, that's-
Normal overalls, he would look like a background character in life, but this shit go hard.
I agree with
It's
that.
true. It got flair, but not too
Yeah.
much flair.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't wear no
Yeah.
overalls. Nah. I'll give it drip. I'll give it.
Drop.
Yo, he got the reverse Tim's
I
on.
hate those.
What the fuck?
Like, what the hell is he going on? It looks like he just went in his closet.
And
It
she-
looks like he went in his closet and it was just
Yo,
like,
I
I'm
had
gonna
to
just
throw
pull
this
this,
in
this,
there.
I'm gonna
this
grab
out.
everything all together. I'm gonna grab my leopard,
Right.
my cheetah girl's hat. I'm gonna
I had
throw my grandmama knitted scarf around the neck. I'm gonna get my Sherlock Holmes limited edition jacket. I got my Mary Poppins umbrella right
The
here
reverse Tim's.
with the reverse Timbs. Yeah, because I'm going to New York because I gotta show niggas how to really dress.
I got my serial killer gloves.
Yeah,
What
like-
is
With the
going on
handbag.
now?
I got my
With the
OJ
handbag.
gloves and my Kanye glasses.
Hey,
Here we
listen.
go.
Drip or drop.
Drop.
She said
Drop.
drop it.
And that coat look dirty.
Man,
Right.
the fuck we doing here?
Like, what is up with people looking?
Baldoni said drop. Looks like mom picked out the outfit.
Yeah.
This is.
That looks like a
He
toddler.
said, make sure
Like
you wear
toddler-
that scarf, baby. You
toddler
don't want to
is
catch a
gonna be
cold.
cold
It's
outside.
gonna be nippy out there, baby.
With the shades on too.
One thing for sure.
Toddlers wear outfits like this.
He was the only person wearing that on
The-
that day. On
Yes,
the
only
per- on the
person.
planet.
On
On the planet.
Only person.
He
No.
said, I'm gonna be unique.
Yes.
I don't even like if I don't even see like if I like a piece of the outfit.
Look, BK Dragon
The
said this
glasses.
pic looks like look
glasses.
definitely looks like
They're
a
regular
JoJo
glasses.
reference.
Looks like a who?
A JoJo reference.
Pose.
He kind of looked like
JoJo.
Dio.
Pose.
That's the kind of fits they be rocking.
Yeah,
though.
he kind of looked like Dio. Now you say it.
They be coming up extra
Yeah,
in JoJo's.
I can see him in
Them
JoJo
fits
Bizarre
me
Adventure.
extra,
Maybe
son.
hard, man. Maybe hard.
Mm.
All right.
Okay.
That concludes drip or drop.
That is drip or drop, y'all.
Okay. I take it.
We gotta get
Yeah,
going.
All right,
gotta
guys.
skate.
Our guest of honor sadly have to depart before we end the show. So please talk to the people.
Thank you guys for having me. I had so much fun being here. Thank you to everybody who participated, voted in the jury court case, just participated in the games. I definitely appreciate it. Thank y'all for having me. Thank you for inviting me. I had a great time. I would love to come back anytime. Thank you, CJ, for your hard work. Monet. I was really happy to be here. Unfortunately, I have a WoW raid, so
That's okay. We understand.
we gotta
No
get
doubt.
going.
No doubt.
World
No
of
doubt.
Warcraft
Anything you want to say?
is important.
I appreciate being here a second time. Probably gonna be here in the future again sometime.
Yeah, come on
So,
back. Come
yeah,
on
man,
back.
It's always fun. I love coming here. I love
All right.
the court setup and everything.
Yeah, I appreciate
It's-
that.
it's all
Good
love.
All right, I'm not gonna hold y'all, but before CJ, before you go,
Yeah, all of you guys, I pinned Foxy's socials
yes,
to the chat, so make sure you guys follow Foxy on all her platforms. Just Kid actually put it up there. I'm not sure. Oh, you just put the ats, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so he put the ats, of course, whatever the ats are with his IG, TikTok, or
TikTok or
Twitch.
Twitch.
Make sure you guys
Same.
follow Foxy on her socials and
Hi, Oni.
Tu-
We're gonna be there. We're on our way.
tune into
Come on,
her
Oni.
stream later on in a couple minutes.
Well,
because-
yeah, I won't be live, but we are gonna be going to a WoW. We
Wow,
are
you
doing
got a WoW raid.
a WoW raid.
Right,
so.
right,
So-
right, right.
Oni, we're on our way. Tell everybody.
let me
we're
not hold
Yes.
them up. You guys know you guys got an open invite.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you again for
Thank you
coming.
for
Appreciate
having
your
me.
participation, Miss Lawyer Sassy.
Yes.
I spoke
Remember
to Judge
that.
200.
Remember
So
that.
chat, let me walk
Born
on our
to
guests and
argue.
be right back. And then we'll get into some more fun. And again, appreciate y'all. All right,
Right,
thank
right.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, I thought you were going to be right there.
Oh, no. No, it's okay. You're good. You're good.
You know,
We're back in. We're back in.
Yeah, she's cool.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
cool people. She's cool
Good people. Good people.
All right, let's run one more game before we run up on out of here.
Yep. Which one?
See that right there. Right there. Yep.
I gotta bring them back in. Boom.
All right, chat. We haven't played Figure It the Fuck Out in a while. So I figure I'll throw one up there. Usually CJ take care of that, but this one is by me.
Yep. The way this picture looks is like Yardy's our kid.
Always like that.
That's Cozate. CJ
That's what- yeah,
Cozate
that's always
Jr. the
like
third. That's bad.
The first one's always easy.
Yep.
Forgot to explain to the people what we're doing, CJ.
Yep. So, since
Shut up.
for those of you who have not played
Figure It the Fuck Out.
Figure It the Fuck Out with us, Figure It the Fuck Out pretty much is you're gonna see a couple pictures as you see like right now. And you're just pretty much going to try to guess what the picture is saying based off of the picture. So in this case, it's Foxy Cat. Fox, the C is missing, and Cat is at the end.
So, yep. And so the first one's always easy, so I made it our guess.
Yeah.
Foxy Cat.
Yep. Yep. She was here, and she had to go, but she'll be back another time.
Get
Let
him think. Get him
I got
think.
it.
You got it? If you think you got it, hold it. If you think you got it, hold it.
Okay.
You think you got it?
I don't know.
I got it. Don't look at chat. I got it.
Don't look at chat. Don't look at chat yet. Let chat do their thing.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think he going. He may get it.
You sure you got
I
it?
got it.
You got it? What gave it away?
The third one. The boy. I'm gonna say it. Hurry up, damn it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna say it.
Yeah.
Need for Speed.
Let's see what chat thinks.
M said, sorry, I'm not very talkative, ATM. I promise.
It's all good. It's all good.
No, it's all good. Yeah, it's all good.
About Donnie said,
Cliff
I
in
don't
here,
know.
drop a bomb for Cliff and popping in. You just missed Foxy and
Kitty
Kid.
Cat say Forza.
Forza.
What do you think, CJ?
I say Need for Speed. Need for Speed.
A Hollywood game is 100% Need for Speed, Need Fork Speed.
Need for Speed.
Yep,
The
Need
first
for
one was
Speed.
Need in
Yeah,
Flower.
Need in Flower.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
Hold it if y'all get it.
Yep.
Oh, got it. God, you're killing me.
I love it.
You got it?
I got it, but I got a funny one to add to it.
Oh, you used to do that. What is that?
This was so good. See what chat talking about.
Netflix,
Exactly what it is.
Netflix and chill.
That's
I
mad funny.
Because the
The flicking of the little thing is killing me. That's killing me. Netflix
Oh, God.
and chill.
Oh God.
my brain
This
is
was
stupid.
good.
It's a fish pluck and lay down and fuck. Like like my brain just like nah, no Netflix and chill.
Oh
Fish
God.
fish net pluck and fuck. Like
Gutter.
lay down and fuck. Like
Shit, that shit old head is weak. Hell yeah.
Jesus
Netflix
Christ.
and chill. That shit was fire.
Yeah.
Shut up, Ash.
Netflix and chill.
Hold it. Hold it.
I don't know what that is. What the fuck is that in the middle of
This is good.
Oh, got it.
You don't
God
got it.
damn
Yeah.
Jesus, I got
You don't.
that.
You don't
I
got
promise
it.
I got it.
You don't got it.
I
Get it.
promise.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I promise I got it. Don't look at the thing.
No, my bad. I thought you got it so I could just get it.
Yes, I got it. But now.
What do you think it is?
The Eiffel Tower. That's
He's
what I
seen
got.
it. Eiffel Tower. He's
No,
seen it.
no, I got it. Oh, when I seen it, I was like, oh.
Yeah,
Let's see what
Eiffel
Chad
Tower.
said.
Because I said Empire State Building first, but I said he wouldn't put Empire State
It's two,
Building.
it's
He
two.
thinks
Mhm.
Twin Tower, and that's what
Eiffel
and that's what
Tower.
made me say all together. Eiffel Tower.
That's a chat said too.
As the chat said, that's the Freedom Tower.
That was the Freedom Tower?
The picture of the tower.
Really?
Freedom Tower.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's not Empire State.
Freedom Tower.
Wow.
You Google it, that's what that's it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is Empire State considered the Freedom Tower too? Let's
Maybe.
see.
It's probably the same thing.
Just Google Freedom Tower, see if that's what pops up. But it is Eiffel Tower.
That's crazy.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi's a little.
Let me do it.
Yep, you do it. Freedom Tower refers to one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Freedom Tower.
Yeah.
That's that.
Okay, so that's where they put for World Trade. That's
Yes.
what's there now
That's what's there now.
versus the Empire State. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But either way, they're all towers.
Yeah. Those towers.
He's full. Tower.
Yeah.
That's what chat got, right?
Yep. Eiffel Tower. Alrighty.
Got it.
You
Oh my
got
God,
it.
you're going.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
You ain't got it.
Just match specific. Everything is match specific. You got it, baby. Look at that shit. Nothing else.
Yo, this is.
You got it, babe. Come on.
He ain't got it.
Come on, baby.
Yeah, she rooting.
I know you, 'cause I gotta quit. I know you got it. Don't think too hard. Don't think too hard at all.
Yo,
I
I was cooking with these today.
What's her name?
Don't give him clues. You're cheating.
What?
You're
That's what I'm
cheating.
saying.
You're cheating now.
I'm looking at the earring, but it's Nunu who I need to be saying, right? New. No, yeah, I got it. It's
All right, come on. I got that.
that's what I said. That's
You
what I
looking at
said.
the
To my,
earring because she holding it.
right. So that's
Yeah.
what I was looking at, but I'm like, this is Nunu from.
But does this say Nunu in the earrings?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
does.
that's
You
what I'm
can't.
saying.
It's hard to see it
Yeah.
though.
Either way,
But I'm like, why is she holding the earring?
And her
what-
name is Nunu.
And who doggy is this? Who
That's a
fucking dog
Yorkie.
is that?
That's a Yorkie.
That was a good one.
And then I'm like,
And
this
the
is.
picture of a city. That's not Manhattan.
That's not even a city. That's
That's
Jersey.
Metropolis
Is it?
in a movie.
That looked like Jersey.
Yep. See what chat's saying.
But Chad says New York City. Ashley, yeah, that building is the Freedom Tower. Okay. Cool.
Oh, that was good.
Yep, New York.
Uh-huh.
Really nice. Really nice.
Oh man, I had a time making that one.
That was good.
I had a
I have
time.
none that stopped me.
I had a
God.
time making that one.
I knew all of you.
That was good.
But you got me.
Oh my god. Anything you want to get into?
I only had the current event situation, but Foxy was here next, so it's cool. We can put it
Okay.
for next week. Okay. Put it for
Oh
next
my
week.
god, that was a great
That
show.
was a good show.
You want to
Good
close it
show.
out?
From
Yep.
the interview.
Good.
from-
Oh,
Good.
yeah, it was fun talking to her.
Yeah.
Good show. Good show for sure. Let me just bring this back up because I done messed up something that I don't want you to be like, DJ, put it there. No. I put nothing nowhere. Thank you. All right, so we back.
Oh,
All right,
man.
so
Had a great show.
great show, everybody. This was so much fun. Hollywood said I didn't know who she was, so that stumped me. I said, I know that's Nunu, but why are we? I said, oh, that's Nunu. Okay, New Yorkie City. But I'm like, that's not
Right.
a city. That's Jersey. That's like factory
Jersey,
Jersey.
but Jersey is a city.
Think it's too logical.
No.
Jersey is a city.
Are they? It is, but no.
I showed you a picture of a straight metropolitan city.
No.
It's called Jersey City. I'm just saying.
But it's not.
The
No.
picture wasn't New York either, though.
That's okay. We live in.
Either whatever works for you.
It works for me. That's what works for me, goddamn. That's what works for me. All right, so wife, we'll start with you.
It was a great show, great stream. I had a lot of fun. Kitty, I knew you was innocent. I've been saying it since day one.
Yep.
We had
Innocent.
fun. I'll see you guys next week. It's Monday morning.
Innocent. I had a good time, everybody. Had such a great time. Shout out to Foxy and Jessica for obviously coming with us. Coming down for them. I say this every show, as y'all already know. This is not just a podcast. This is a show. This is family. This is community. And we can't do this every weekend without you guys on Sundays, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, guys, make sure you pop in every Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I can't stress that enough. Mr. 200.
Yes, thank you.
Is Judge 200 okay? Is everything situated with Judge 200?
After the court case, he came and he told me what the proceedings was.
Yes.
And then he said he got more important shit to go do.
Right.
Because usually judges only work on Sundays. He
Yeah,
only
yeah.
did this especially for us.
Yeah.
So I couldn't hold him up anymore. He went along. He said he told me to let you guys know, to let him know when the next case pops up.
Right.
And he will pop up.
Right. For sure.
Judge
Because
200.
we got a nice court setting now. Now we got a nice court studio. See? Yeah. See, good court studio right there. This
And guess
is beautiful.
what?
This
We'll be
is
taking more
beautiful.
people to trial.
More people gonna come to trial.
More
So
people will be going to trial. We're gonna be doing this a lot more often over here.
yes. You see, look at this. This is beautiful.
That's
This
our
is-
courtroom, y'all.
yes.
That's Judge 200's room right
Judge
there.
200's room. We appreciate him.
Feel me? So I definitely appreciate Miss Foxy Cat and Just Kid for
Yes.
popping out and hanging out, being such good sport.
Yes.
And shout out to Kitty.
Yeah, shout out to
Kitty
Top
for
of
going
bomb.
along with everything and
Drop
supporting the game lounge. Shout out to Cozy as well.
Shout out to Cozy. Top of bomb for Cozy.
Y'all know we all
Some
love
of the greatest smarts the game house can have to offer. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. So we gather here to have a good time, and I appreciate you guys participation. Cozy and Kitty were a W sport
Right.
with the situation. So W chat, W us, CJ, I appreciate you.
Yes,
Monday, I
indeed.
appreciate
Yes, of
you.
course.
Y'all already know it's your boy.